Good morning. The Tuesday, June 6, 2017, regular Board of County Commissioners meeting will now be called to order. In the beginning, we'll have a moment of silence and reflection for our first responders, which will be followed by an invocation by our Clerk of the Court, Jeffrey R. Smith, and then will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Tim Zoll. Please rise. And I ask you now to join us for a moment of silence in support of all of our first responders.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together and do thy business here. Lord, I just ask for wisdom for these 5 commissioners as they address all the business of the county. Lord, today is the 73rd anniversary of the Normandy invasion, and Lord, we just thank you for all those men. Sunday was the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Midway, and Lord, those 2 battles and events that changed the course of the war, and we just thank you for your guidance. And we thank you for all those men and women who gave the last full measure of devotion. Lord, we just ask for prayer today for all the first responders and the men and women that are currently serving all around the world in the military. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. The first item will be any additions, deletions to the agenda and emergency items. I just wanted to announce that item 10B3, the discussion by Matt Lekowitz on Jungle Trail, has been pulled by Matt Lekowitz, and he will not be speaking today. So if there's anybody here that was looking forward to a conversation or discussion on Jungle Trail, that will not occur today. Anything else?
Yes. Chair, right before the meeting, I spoke with George MacArthur. He has an item 10B2, which was a request to speak regarding Allboard Florida Brightline. Mr. MacArthur talked with me this morning and said that he would like to have this item pulled, and he's just going to join our meeting and watch.
Okay, so item 10B3 and item 10B2 will be pulled from the agenda, and I see that our presenters for item 10B1 are here, so we will have some public discussion. Anything further?
Move to approve agenda as amended.
That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Adams. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The first item is a proclamation under proclamations and presentations is a public announcement for hurricane preparedness. Are you ready? And yes, we are entering the season of concern and caution. Good morning, Chief.
Well, good morning. How are we? Brian Burkey, Assistant Chief Emergency Services, and I get the pleasure of joining you guys this morning to talk about hurricane preparedness. As we all know, that hurricane season 2017 started June 1st. It'll end November 30th of 2017. And we're here to talk about preparedness and what do we do around our homes and what do we do about our families and things of that nature in order to prepare. The experts are telling us that it's going to be a slightly more busier season than we have experienced in the past. But remember, it only takes one to make landfall in our area to ruin our whole season for us. So, remember, looking back, we had several of them ruin our seasons several years ago, and we really don't want to repeat those. But if we have to, we're going to be well prepared for them. So, with that being said, we're going to talk about we need to start preparing our homes. We should have started last month. Last month's time, we should have started trimming trees. We should have started preparing things around our homes and hauling those things to the landfill. Landfills doesn't need to be the last stop 3 days before the hurricane hits to dump all of our stuff. Our landfill guys are here to tell you that that's not the time to do it because it becomes a problem for them as well. They can't secure it and keep it from being blowing objects as well. So It's time. Time is now. Let's start preparing. Let's prepare our homes. Let's trim those low-lying trees, those dead tree limbs, things of nature that may impact your home should the winds pick up and be catapulted across your yard or across to your neighbor's yard, or even worse, your neighbor's tree coming to your house. So with that being said, let's start preparing. Let's start trimming. Let's start hauling off those things. What else do we do around our homes to prepare? We take those loose items that are laying in our yards, patio furniture, things of that nature. What do you do with that? We suggest that if you have a swimming pool, you throw it in your swimming pool and let it sit in the water, and that way it will not blow away as well. Secure it in a place, a building that is structurally sound enough to keep it from catapulting across your yard as well. Remember, everything that's laying in your yard ends up being a flying object at some point in time, depending on the wind speed that goes with it. So we all have plenty of things to do. We come up with family plans. What do you do with your family? All right, family that's out of town, they want to be able to contact you after the storm to make sure you're okay. Set up those plans now. There are numerous agencies out there through social media that have registration websites that you can go through as well, and you can register there. We talk about work. Some places expect you to report for work, don't we? County government expects you to be here to provide services for our citizens and our visitors of Indian River County. So we have work plans, and those work plans do overflow into our family plans as well to make sure our families are well taken care of and they're protected as well. Know when to report back to work. Contact your employer. After the storm, when do you want us back? Things of that nature. And we kind of move forward on those aspects. You want to secure your job to make sure it's afterwards. We all want to make more money so we can get our economy back to where it needs to be. So we do that, and we do that quite well. In River County, we want to contact our citizens and give them the latest and greatest information before the storm. And we do that in numerous ways through lots of social medias and lots of websites that we have as well. Just want to remind everybody that if you go to the county's website for emergency services, that's www.ircbcc.com. You can go in there and you can download all of our pamphlets about hurricane preparedness, and it'll also talk about all the ways that we can notify you in case of an emergency. Some of those emergencies are overflowed into www.ready.gov, READY.gov. There's plenty of information there as well. The websites all talk about lots of pamphlets and things of that nature that we have that are available for us. We have magnets, we have pamphlets that are done in English and Spanish as well. They're available today out in the atrium and out on the bar out in the lobby as well. And we have those. We have what is called Alert Indian River. Alert Indian River, it's www.alertindianriver.com. You go on there and you can register to receive all the pertinent information for Indian River County via text message on your phone or by email. You can pick and choose what category of storms or events that are going on in our county that are local emergencies and be alerted to those before it happens. It's also covered on national syndicated television and weather stations as well, but we focus on the stuff that is of a local emergency for us. So we want to contact you. If we can't contact you, we can't alert you. It's kind of where it's at. So we remind everybody to go to www.alertindianriver.com and please register your phone or your email so that you get the latest and greatest information from Indian River County before, during, and after a storm. So with that being said, I'm here to answer any questions to the best of my ability. And everybody just be prepared and let's move forward and have a safe season.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr.
Any
Chairman?
questions?
Yeah. Brian, thank you. And, could you just take a minute and briefly touch on our shelters that are available if a hurricane comes and the fact that we do have a special needs and a pet shelter? I think
Yes, we do.
get out.
I'll start with the pet-friendly shelter. The pet-friendly shelter is located at Liberty Magnet School. You must be pre-registered in order to participate in this shelter. The shelter will house you and your pet under certain conditions and circumstances. And again, if you go to www.ircbcc.com, it gives you all the pertinent information on that one. Special needs shelter is for those folks who are at home and have home health needs, like home health oxygen, or if you have a day provider with you and you're unable to ambulate, things of that nature, or your medical needs exceed what can be taking place in a regular shelter, we do take care of them, and that is done at the Treasure Coast Elementary. Again, go to the website, IRCBCC.com. You can register online and get that done. We'll take care of even transporting you to and from that shelter and make sure that everybody has what they need. Again, with any and all shelters, make sure you come prepared with some things like what your medications are, bring a week's supply of those medications, blankets, pillows, things else. We do the best that we can with what we have to make it as much of a Holiday Inn as we can, but by no means do we have any Holiday Inns here. They are shelters, they are places of last refuge, and we do the best that we can. So, and then during the storm, based upon the impact of the storm and its location, will dictate on how many normal general population shelters that are open throughout the county. They do vary from locations, but we do have the ability to open numerous shelters.
And then, Brian, one other thing that I'll be doing this weekend is those that have a generator at home, now's a good time to haul that out, get it fired up, put some fresh gas in there, and make sure all the breakers and everything are working. So if we do lose power, you've run the test there. And then just to emphasize the importance of being prepared, you know, last year when Matthew came, we had all the shutters up on the house. We'd fired the generator up. I had gas cans ready to go. We had food, we had water. And we're hunkered down, and about 8:30 that night, we're watching the storm track, and we're thinking, you know, that's a Category 4, and right now it's looking like it's coming right at us. And I told my wife, better go pack a go bag, because when the roof goes, we're going. And so I just, you know, even though we thought we were good, we were secure, when that thing was coming at us, it was like, you know what, this is getting pretty scary, and we really need to be prepared for when something really bad happens. So I don't think, folks, you can be prepared enough for a potential storm. So just kind of always be vigilant and listen to what our EOC folks are saying. So
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brian.
You know, follow directions and things of that nature, and we become complacent. You know, like it's not going to happen, or I got plenty of time to get it done, get prepared. Time runs out quickly when the storm is headed our way. So, and another important thing about the generator, sir, is make sure your generators are outside and running. They're not indoors. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a very serious thing, and we have had people in our own county suffer from carbon monoxide poisoning by running their generators indoors. So remember, they go outside in a well-ventilated area. Very well.
Unfortunately, we do have incidents that occur, and I appreciate the awareness. I just realized we have a special guest today that's here from charter school. Andrew Powell is here watching us for school, but yet he's in an age category that has never seen a serious storm.
Correct.
And I think we have to get the awareness out how unpredictable they are, that they're tracked in models, and when something's tracked in a model, anything can happen. You mentioned the shelters, and yes, we do have special needs shelters, and they are outfitted with emergency personnel as well as to assist. But we most certainly don't have enough sheltering for all of our citizens. So a plan should be intact, and travel plan, full tank of gas, and all the necessities. I think that go bag should be done the minute we hear about a storm coming, because quite frankly, we might have to travel 200 or 300 miles away from the path and into a hotel that's a little more secure.
Well said. You know, in those go bags, you know, make sure you take everything you need with you. And it goes back to that family plan. You know, is the family plan to evacuate the area? Is it to get out of harm's way, things of that nature? And like you said, you may end up several hundred miles away, depending on how far you're going to get out of harm's way. Again, but shelters are just that. They are shelters. You know, make sure you come prepared with everything you need to go to a shelter if that's your choice. So, absolutely.
And we want to forewarn citizens too as well that getting back may be as difficult as securing for the storm. We may be under a little more of a control here in Indian River County as we were in the past.
Right. We've learned a lot of lessons from the past. You know, we've made changes to our procedures and policies. Getting back can be difficult at times depending on the magnitude of the storm. You know, are the power lines down across Route 60? Is I-95 accessible? Things of that nature. Is the area a hazard? Does it provide a safe way for you to get back to your home? And if it does not, you know, we could lecture all day long on safety concerns during a hurricane. And do we open up the bridges when we don't know the barrier island is safe? We must send our crews out and do our assessments before we can allow anybody to move around the county. And again, if the emergency alerts and the messages state to stay in your homes and not to impact the roadways after the storm, please, we ask you, stay in your homes, allow the emergency services personnel to get out, allow us to evaluate the county's needs and where we're at, and and allow rescues to take place. You know, nothing's worse than being impacted by those people who are out sightseeing. Those sites are going to be there for days. It's hard enough to get fire trucks, ambulances, and other vehicles around the county in an emergency fashion without having to fight the sightseers that are on the roadways and the power lines that are down across those as well. Everything's a hazard. So yes,
Thank you, Chief.
you are so welcome.
Anything further?
All good.
No? Good.
Thank you guys very much. Have a
Hey,
safe
thank you.
season, everybody.
Thank you. And the information is available on our website.
On our website, yes, IRCES.com.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, folks.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the regular minutes of May the 2nd, 2017, as well as the regular meeting of May the 9th, 2017.
Second.
That's a motion by Commissioner Adams, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We now have informational items. Is there any interest for further discussion amongst the board? Anybody from the audience? Thank you. We'll now move to the consent agenda. And is there any interest in pulling anything from the consent agenda?
No.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to further discuss or pull for discussion any of the consent items? Seeing none?
Move to approve consent agenda?
That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. Any further discussion here? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next item will be a discussion from Jeffrey R. Smith, our Clerk of the Circuit Court and Controller, on deferred compensation. I believe we have a presentation today. Thank you, Scott, and good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Smith, Union County Clerk of the Court and Comptroller. This is a continuation from an agenda item on May 9th, as you will recall. What I'd like to do first is introduce Jacob Peacock, our senior consultant from ANCO, and he's going to do a presentation, and then he's going to open it up for questions.
Good morning. Thank you for your time this morning.
morning.
As Clerk Smith mentioned, I'm Jacob Peacock. I'm the Director of Retirement Solutions with ANCO Consulting out of Orlando. We work with municipalities across the state and the country in regards to 457s, 401As, pensions, and consulting them on their investments and their retirement needs. I apologize, I wasn't able to make the previous meeting with a scheduling conflict, so hopefully my goal this morning is really just to answer some of the questions, hopefully, that were asked at the last committee meeting, or at the last commission meeting, and then also to address any questions or concerns that you may have at this point. So just by way of introduction, I just wanted to summarize kind of where we got to, how we got to where we're at. The current state, as you see on the presentation, the current state of the county has 3 different providers currently: Nationwide, ICMA, and Florida League of Cities. And the average fees that participants pay for those record-keeping services are illustrated there below, ranging from 42 basis points for Florida League to 96 basis points for ICMA-RC. It's important to understand the context here, where you're at, because that is the context for which this project was undertaken. If you look on the following page on slide 3, this is the other side of the of the current situation is you have multiple investments. So there's over 100 different investments to choose from across these three providers. Participants are left to compare and contrast and choose these investments on their own. And what the industry time and time again has shown is that participants left to their own devices, the majority of participants feel ill-equipped, uninformed, uneducated, or just don't want to mess up their retirement, and so they take no action. And as we talked about, I appreciate the message on hurricane preparedness, and I think a lot about retirement preparedness and retirement readiness, and that's really the ultimate goal of this project, is assessing the county, where is the county and their participants in their retirement readiness, and how can we help to get them into a better situation. And so looking at the fund choices and at the expenses was really the start of this project, looking at multiple providers, not really able to leverage economies of scale as it relates to fees and other expenses, as well as to really streamline and review those investments on a go-forward basis. And so I just draw your attention to page 4 really quickly, the fiduciary responsibility. In the private sector, there's something called IRCBCC that really puts the parameters on everything as it relates to oversight on these defined contribution and deferred compensation plans. In the government sector, we're not, 457s and 401As aren't subject to IRCBCC requirements. However, it is left to state statute in a lot of cases. And so in the state of Florida, one of the state statutes that refers to the fiduciary oversight is 112.656, which essentially just mirrors the requirements of IRCBCC that says, putting forth all decision-making in the best interest of participants and their beneficiaries, and striving to defray reasonable expenses. So making sure costs are in line with services being received. Nothing in statute or in IRCBCC regulation says anything about choosing the low-cost provider or anything of that nature. It just asks that we make decisions in the best interest of those participants. And so with that as the backdrop, I think we move on to page 5, really just to help everyone understand where we went, kind of the journey that was undertaken starting in the fall of last year. The county put together a plan oversight committee, and that committee hired a consultant, myself, our firm, ANCO Consulting, to review the plans currently with the county and to make any fiduciary recommendations based on IRCBCC best practice, based on best practice of FGFOA and some of the other public oversights, such as NAGDA, which is the National Association of Government Defined Contribution Administrators. So really what's seen as best practice across the industry. So this review committee was established, and there was representation from all constitutional offices. So we had a good group, good representation to really make sure that all sides were being seen, everything was being thought through. Based on the initial review of the plans, you'll see their recommendation was made to consolidate to a single vendor to reduce the costs of the plan participants from what we described on that first page, somewhere ranging between 42 basis points and 96 basis points. So on average, if you looked at that in the aggregate, it averaged about 75, 76 basis points for the plan for that those record-keeping fees. So cost was one, certainly streamlining investment options, again, just based off of what the industry has found out over the past 5 to 10 years, that participants are really looking to simplify retirement. They're scared about retirement and how do they prepare for it, much like natural disasters. There's so much we can do to prepare, but then at the end of the day, we don't really know what to expect, and a lot of participants find themselves in that same situation. And then last but not least, I think improving employee education. When you have a fragmented multi-vendor situation, each of those vendors only has a piece of the overall pie, if you will, and so it's fragmented on how do participants get their education. They have to choose which of these vendors offers the lowest fee, or the most competitive fee for what they're getting, and that's traditionally hard for them to figure out. They also have to decide which investments are going to be the best investments for them in planning for their retirement, and sometimes those investments may not have been, vendor A may offer the best overall record-keeping fee, but vendor B may offer the best lineup for what they're looking for, and so you see there's some conflict there, and again, majority of the participants really don't go through that process. So with that in mind, the committee decided to proceed with an RFP to go out to the marketplace with a consolidation in mind. They received 9 responses back. From those 9 responses, the committee elected to interview from a finalist standpoint 5 of those vendors and brought each of them here to the county, did an in-depth interview process, reviewed the team that would be servicing the participants, had them talk to them about what type of education they provide, got to know those people who would be working specifically with the participants. From all of that, that last bullet, again, the committee decided to select Nationwide as the sole provider for those services at the county for several reasons. One, because they had a very cost competitive proposal. They also offered open architecture, which means that we can, and all of the vendors did this, but it was required that they are open architecture, which means we can build the fund lineup as a county however we want. So we're not limited to a subset of investments that has been traditionally the case on how these providers have set up their plans, but really we can dictate as a committee, and as consultants we'll have those discussions on those fund lineups and ultimately settle on what is the best lineup going forward. And then Nationwide did have, they were the most, out of the providers, we did interview 3 current providers. In those 5, and Nationwide obviously had the largest amount of experience as far as participants that were engaged in their services. So we thought that was good from a continuity standpoint as we look to consolidate the county. You know, there is always fear in change, but it also allowed the participants to see some sort of common face, because Nationwide had a predominant fixture in the county from the retirement plan. And then last but not least, they did offer the fixed account at 3.5% for an additional 2 years. And I think that's where we, on page 6, that's kind of where it was left at the last meeting, which was Nationwide's proposal, which was brought before the commission, which was we were going to essentially reduce the record-keeping fee. They were offering 12 basis points, so reducing that 76 average expense to 12 for all participants, which is a substantial reduction. And then the fixed account being locked in at that minimum crediting rate of 3.5% for an additional 24 months. However, I think there was some confusion or some concern around that 3.5%, so I'd like to take a moment and just touch on that and clarify where that, what that is and what that represents. So if we look on page 7, and this is, again, just for context purposes. So we have the Nationwide fixed account, which is an account that guarantees or that promises participants who invest in that fund, in that account, it gives them a 3.5% minimum floor while they're in that plan. That's important because now, currently, most of these contracts are written with a 1% floor, which is actually mandated by the state of Florida, that these guaranteed fixed accounts and general accounts, they have to offer at least a 1% minimum floor. And that's pretty much what the marketplace sees now. And so it is, you know, there was some concern around that 3.5% moving, you know, if we're locking that in for 2 years and then it could go to 1, how does that affect the participants that are in that 3.5%? And that's a very valid question. And that's the context for page 7, is just understanding who has exposure to that fixed account. So you'll see the top of the page there, 35 participants, or about 6% of the total participants in the 457 plan, are solely invested in that fixed account. And that 35 participants represents about 2 million of the 29.6 million of county dollars. In addition, there are 62 additional participants who have some allocation to that fixed account as part of their diversification strategy. That's about 10% of total plan participants. That represents an additional $4 million. So in total, about just over $6 million, and just under 100 participants have some exposure to that fixed account. Now, if we look on page 8, this is just the context around. I think there was some confusion out of the last meeting that the fixed account was more of perhaps an annuity type, 3.5% for life type of contract. So I wanted to just level set what that contractually really is. And there's a representative here from Nationwide as well that's, once we open it up for questions, he'll certainly be available to speak on some of these as well. But in the current contract as it exists in the county, Nationwide or the county reserve the right and have the ability to make changes to this contract at any time. The 3.5% is a guaranteed minimum crediting rate until the contract is changed. So Nationwide could go and change that contract at any time. And offer the 1% crediting rate floor as they offer currently. So you'll see a couple of different things, but that's really the summary of page 8 is that contractually this can change at any time. It's merely a guarantee that they're going to pay you pay these participants 3.5% until that contract's changed. That's important to note because in the previous, the original best and final proposal that was put before the commission was 12 basis points, and that 3.5% was locked in for 2 years, and then it opened up the floor or moved to 1%. That doesn't mean that the rate would immediately go to 1%. It's all based on how they're invested long-term in their general account and interest rates and a variety of other factors, but it means that there is the possibility that that 3.5% could eventually move to 1%. That not real consolidation if you're in that 3.5%, obviously, that floor could go lower, but that's the context of what that really means. It doesn't mean that on the 25th month that's immediately going to drop to 1. It just means that it has the ability to do so. With that being said, we went back based on the feedback and the questions and concerns from the previous meeting. We went back to Nationwide. We reconvened as a committee, had some discussion, went back to Nationwide and asked them about grandfathering in those currently in the 3.5% and somehow keeping that floor at 3.5% for the long-term duration. If that was a possibility, they said it was not. So we asked them to get creative on some other alternatives, being mindful that the commission had some concerns on those participants that were in that 3.5 and how we could better help them in this interim as we're consolidating to a single provider. So with that, they proposed 2 different options. The first option was moving the record-keeping fees from 12 basis points to 25 basis points, but with that, they would be able to offer the 3.5% minimum crediting rate for 60 months, so for basically the duration of the initial contract. In the RFP, we did ask for the ability to a 5-year contract with potential 2-year extensions for a total of 9 years, and they did agree that that would be able to remain for the period of that 9 years, that if we kept that at 25 basis points, we could keep that 3.5% minimum crediting rate for that duration. So that is certainly puts more parameters around that than was really in the past current contract. And then option number 2, the record-keeping fees, keep those at 12 basis points to not change that expense for other participants, but then the fixed account, lock that in at 3.5 for 36 months, and then step it down to where that minimum rate could be 2.5 for those following 24 months. It's really two different approaches there. One really focusing on that 3.5%, and then the other keeping that record-keeping fee locked at 12, but seeing what else we could do on that 3.5%. We did have discussion that because Nationwide couldn't grandfather it in, and because that was really a difference maker or a tiebreaker in the deliberations of the original RFP, the committee asked for us to go back to the second place provider, Lincoln, and ask them for their creative solutions as well. And so you'll find those on page 10. And just a summary there for a full consolidation for Lincoln under option A, if they decided to go, if we consolidated all the Nationwide ICMA and Florida League assets to Nationwide, or to Lincoln, they would offer that at 11 basis points compared to the 12, so similar fee there. That would require the utilization of the Lincoln Stable Value Fund, which is more of just a regular investment product. But they would offer an enhanced minimum crediting rate to kind of mitigate that issue. So you see there 3.5% for the first year, 2.5%, and then stepping down to 2%, and then 1% in years 4 and thereafter. And then they also offered an option B, which is a partial consolidation if their decision was to leave Nationwide alone and consolidate the ICMA and Florida League assets, what would that look like? And so that's option B, which is about $14 million transfers to Lincoln. The record-keeping fee would be about 19 basis points. It'd also be utilizing the Lincoln stable value, but it has a minimum crediting rate, as mentioned, at 1%. So with all that said, the committee reconvened, has reconvened several times, but we reconvened to review all of those options, to discuss the pros and cons of each, compare them with our original decision and our decision process from the RFP, and the committee recommends to the commission that we approve the Nationwide's revised option 1 proposal as it accomplishes the original goals set forth by the committee, as you see there on slide 11, which is reducing participant fees, streamlining investments, improving available participant education programs by making it a seamless one provider across the county. But then it also addresses the concerns that were expressed around that 3.5% by locking in that rate for a minimum of 60 months with the potential of 4 additional years tacked on to the end of that. With that, I think I'll pause. There's some additional information to answer a couple other questions, but I know that was a lot of information and probably covered a lot of what the discussion was last meeting, so I'd open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner O'Brien?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Jacob, and for the additional information. If you look at the breakdown of the age ranges of the participants in the fixed account, the vast majority are older folks from 56 age and older. So I think it is important, and those are probably employees that may feel that they're not the most sophisticated, and they want to just make sure they're protecting every dollar they got, and I understand that completely. The other, 11 or 12 that are younger, I think it would be our responsibility to reach out to those individuals and start educating them up and let them know that fixed account, at age 26, you shouldn't be locked into a fixed account, and do some more education with those folks. So I do like the idea of protecting those older people that have either retired or close to retirement and may not be real sophisticated. I think the fixed account is good. However, I have to balance that with the fact that if we go with the new option 1, where the record-keeping fees are up to 25 basis points versus 12, it's about a $40,000 hit to all the other members in the plan to kind of preserve the fixed account for the 5 years for that 6% of the employees in that. And then the one, option 2, if we go down to 2.5% for 24 months, 1% of the $6 million in that is about $60,000. So those folks would be taking a $60,000 hit. So it's kind of where I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to land on this is, who's going to take the hit, I guess, is really the thing. Although the $60,000 for the fixed account folks is about $1,700 and change per participant because there's so few of them, so that's a pretty significant hit to them. Whereas the $40,000 savings and record-keeping fees with 633 participants is $63 hit. So anyway, I'm still trying to sort all this out, but just working through it. But I do appreciate the fact y'all came back, and I do, like I said, I think it is important that those older folks are in the fixed account, that we do need to preserve that for them. So with that, thank you, Jacob. I don't think I have any other questions right now.
Thank you.
Good point. Commissioners?
Not yet. I'm hoping to see if there's any employees that have any.
I do too, and I wanted to ensure, I see the Human Resource Director is here, and I have a question for you. I want to ensure that the last discussion we had, it was, and for Jason as well, that we wanted to ensure that the employees have been well exposed to this discussion and have the best information moving forward. And you said that you were going to have a couple of meetings, and I would like to know if there was a great attendance.
So, yes, Suzanne Boyle, Human Resources Director. We did have 2 meetings. Both Jeff and I were in attendance, as well as Diane. And they were not well attended, but the employees that did attend were very engaged. They were very interested in the change process. They were supportive of saving money on their fees. They were surprised at the amount of fees that they were currently paying. So they're looking forward to the opportunity to reduce their fee exposure.
As Commissioner O'Brien pointed out, which I intended on pointing out, I mean, there is a compromise here.
Yes.
And that compromise, as we're looking, we have some employees that have but just a few years to go before they're making that major decision of retirement.
Right.
And this is a critical decision. What else could we do to ensure that all of the employees understand the program? It's complicated, but is there any way that we can ensure that our employees have the best in information and they can bring it home to their families?
Absolutely, and that's why we're really supportive. All of the constitutional offices that are taking place in this consolidation are very supportive of a consolidation so that we can concentrate on one plan, concentrate on an education strategy to our employees, and be able to move forward and really focus on a financial wellness program for our employees preparing for retirement.
Because quite frankly, this is a decision that probably, and you identified that the meeting was not as well attended as you would have liked it. You would like to see all 700 employees in one room, but that's just not going to happen. People have other things to do, but this decision is made at home with the family, the spouses, and sometimes there's outside investing consultants that people are engaged with that might want to share information as well before they make this decision.
The decision to participate in the 457 plan?
Yes.
Absolutely, and we will approach it from that whole perspective where we provide educational opportunities as we transition regarding the fund lineup, regarding investment choices, and really reach out to employees so that they are better informed than they have been in the past.
I want to ensure that we don't hear that famed sentence, "I was not aware."
Right, I think we've taken a lot of steps in that direction. We've included information in our newsletters. We've reached out to employees to attend. We've talked to the managers and supervisors to encourage employee attendance. We actually had, at the last committee meeting, the firefighters union, the president was, John O'Connor was present, and he said, one of the questions he asked is there going to be a decision made so that we can make the move, and it was related to the savings and fees that they will experience. So I think there's good buy-in. I think now that we've done some additional outreach so that people understand really what this is and how it's going to benefit the participants.
Thank you.
And there will be ongoing communication with the employees as we go through the transition
Yes.
process, including the selection of the funds to be included. We've invited participation from the employees, and there is a plan that we will continue to keep the employees in the loop throughout this process. And then, as Suzanne was talking about going forward, we think we'll get better ongoing outreach to the employees for their retirement planning needs.
Thank you, that's important.
Yes.
Thank you, Jason.
Yes,
And
Mr.
Jeff
Chairman,
Smith.
the provider has guaranteed at least 8 educational opportunities for them to sit down with employees. That's not happening now. So that's an addition that the employees are going to enjoy a benefit, because they're going to have not just the quarterly where the representative comes and signs you up, but actual education meetings where they'll sit down and go through questions and educate the employees on the benefits of providing for your own future, and how to best to do that. Take it to your advisor if you have one, and have them give you input, but, you know, we're going to have these educational opportunities where the employees can sit down and ask a lot of questions and not just be sitting there with a piece of paper and having to make a decision, which is currently happening now. So,
We're
and
excited.
you know, even though Commissioner O'Brien brought up a point that with the increase in the record-keeping fees in the new proposal, even at 25 basis points, everybody is still going to enjoy a benefit of reduced fees. So you got to keep that in mind as well. Yeah.
Right. It just depends upon the range of investment that people want to choose from, and I believe that's a family decision. And there is still a compromise. But everybody does have a benefit of the reduced rate, yes. Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions at this point?
Got a couple more for Jacob, but I'd like to see if anybody
Yes.
from any employees.
I
want
would,
to
I would
speak.
like to see if any of the employees or any citizens would like to add to this conversation. There are two podiums. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners and County Administrator and County Attorney. My name is Linda Ehrman. I'm the HR Director for the Clerk of Court. And as an employee and one who was in private business for many years and did not have the benefits of being a government employee, I had to save for my own retirement. And I gave all my money to financial advisors because I was going to be a conscientious individual and know that I needed to save for my retirement. We didn't have a lot of money. They took our money, they invested it, they made their commission, and they forgot about us. When I came to the Clerk of Court and learned that I could save my money on my own for my retirement, that I would have control over, and be able to communicate with someone, I was thrilled, very thrilled. Did I know anything about Nationwide, ICMA, or then Florida League of Cities? No. But I did know one thing, that I could save my money and that it might be safer. As an HR director with a government employer, our employees are struggling to just pay their bills, much less save for their retirement. They think that the FRS is going to do it for them. And yes, it's going to be fine if you're a high-earning employee and you've earned a lot of money and you have a great years of vesting and service. But other than that, it's not going to cut it. It's a three-legged stool. You need to save on your own. I try to encourage our employees to save. I try to make sure that FRS comes to our organization to let them know that don't retire if you don't have enough money. Our clerk of court attended a conference, and there was a person there who was private industry trying to promote their business, and the big hoopla was fiduciary. You are responsible as a fiduciary. So this person, to me, my impression, I'm talking as my own individual, felt that this person tried to put the fear of God into the people attending this conference for their own benefit. But we were instructed, the finance director and myself, to look into it and meet with this person. We did. We formed a committee, and we realized that there is a fiduciary responsibility. Did the county know? Did the county aware, has everyone read the news about the fiduciary responsibility that we have? So Mr. Smith, our clerk of court, brought it to the attention of the county administrator and also the constitutional agencies. I highly respect the clerk of court for his concern and caring about his employees and the other employees that work for the county. I then became aware of our record-keeping fees and said, oh my goodness, Really, we're paying that much in record-keeping fees. And I'm hoping to retire in the next year, and I have been conscientiously saving as much of my paycheck as I can in my deferred comp. And I would like to keep my money in my deferred comp plan when I retire and know that it will be safe and that we will have a fiduciary who's going to be responsible and keep care of our money instead of the sharks that are out there that are wanting to take your money so that they can make a living off of you, a very good living off of you. So there are no guarantees in life, and clearly you found out today that Nationwide can change the contract, and at any time. So that 3.5% that you're fighting for 6 participants, it can go away at any time. I just request that you consider this very seriously, because it's something that you're doing for your employees. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Anyone else? Commissioners?
A couple more things for Jacob, if he doesn't mind. Sure. Jacob, Diane gave us all this morning a large spreadsheet, and just want to say I'm sure Commissioner Solari would be impressed because it's got lots of columns and colors and everything.
We'll save one for him.
Send him a copy.
It breaks all of the funds that we have now and grouped them by asset class. And 2 things that kind of stood out, even though the fixed account is only, what was it, 7% of the plan assets, the 2 fixed accounts we have are by far the largest total investment in a particular account of all the other ones we have. The second thing that kind of stood out, and maybe you can answer this is this a trend? If I look at a lot of the target date funds, they seem to be very low invested compared to some of the other, like a large value, large growth, or a mid cap. Is that typical that these target dates aren't really that popular, or is this an anomaly, or what's the industry like?
Well, that's a fantastic observation. So target date funds really didn't start to gain any traction until after 2008. So in 2006, something was passed called the Pension Protection Act, kind of referred to as PPA. And in that, it gave fiduciaries some cover in that prior to the Pension Protection Act, if you were to default your participants into investments, so let's say they joined the plan, but they didn't set up their investment allocation, or if you have a plan where the money's automatically going into it, like a 401A or something, that money's automatically going into the plan, but somebody has to make an investment decision where that money goes. And so prior to the Pension Protection Act, participants employers were funneling that into the stable value, the fixed account, something seen as the lowest risk investment. Problem being is that then you have 20, 30 years later, and somebody that joined the plan, never made an investment decision, relied upon their employer, they sat at 3% for 30 years. And they came back to their employer and they started, threatening litigation. And back in the early, late 90s, early 2000s, hey, I've been sitting in this plan, you put me in this investment, and now I wasn't able to retire with dignity. And so what Pension Protection Act aimed to do was say, okay, as a fiduciary, you make certain decisions on behalf of the participants of the plan, right, as it relates to fees, as it relates to investments. Those can't be negotiated by the individual participant, and so our task is to make those, have that oversight. And so it said, if you are going to default your participants into an investment, we'll give you cover to invest them in something that is diversified, to allow them to have that opportunity for growth over that long period of time. And so from 2006 forward, what you saw, Pension Protection Act kind of laid out a few different things. It said it had to be either a balanced fund, like a 50-50 type stock bond mutual fund. You could default them into a risk-based portfolio, so you have those currently in the plan. you could default them into target date funds. And then something newer that's also included in that is called managed accounts. But kind of the long answer, or the short answer to your question, is target date funds really started gaining steam in 2008 once that protection was provided. And so we've seen across the industry, the public sector has lagged behind that a little bit just because of some of these other issues with multiple vendors and lack of, kind of cohesive education. But if you look at the trend line on dollars that have gone to target date funds over the past decade, I mean, it's been pretty substantial. And so
Okay.
I would envision here that the observation you made that the VT Plus fund and the fixed account have the majority of assets, because that's kind of been a default for years.
Right.
But really in the past 5 years, you've really started to see more on target dates, and I would envision younger employees. That's a slide later in the presentation, which just talks about the surveys say that 70% or more of participants on average want somebody to make the investment decision for them, and that's where those target dates are starting to come into play. So.
Okay. And that would be good then for that less sophisticated employee. For the audience, the target dates, say we hire somebody now, today in 2017, their retirement day might be 2055. So they pick a target date fund of 2055. That fund will have a mix of investments that are more aggressive initially to get the growth. And then over time, as you get closer and closer to that 2055, the investments will automatically shift and be more conservative, so that you preserve your gains going into retirement. So and what you all are proposing, well, we can get to that in a minute, I guess. But the other thing was, Jacob, late last night we got an email from you with a sample plan that your firm has done for another government or whoever, with 17 funds, 10 target funds, and a cash management account. Just real quick going through them. The Morningstar rating, one of the funds was a 5-star, 8 were 4 stars, 3 were 3 stars, and 2 were 2 stars. When you put together something like this, do you kind of monitor the fund performance over time, and then at some point might come back and, hey, this fund started out as a 4-star and we were happy with them, but 2 years ago they changed the manager and now it's only a 2-star, so we recommend. Do you do that follow-up and monitoring the performance?
We do. So part of our role is we would meet with the committee every quarter. So we come out, we present an investment book, and it has, in addition to your investment policy statement, which would kind of dictate how managers are put into the fund and what puts them on watch. So some of these metrics, 3 to 5 year returns and various metrics. We come out every quarter, meet with the committee, go through that report. If there's any that are flagged for showing some sort of underperformance against the investment policy statement, we'll have some discussion around that. And then you basically follow that, and if after several quarters that can't be explained by perhaps the larger economic situation, if it's something that's specific to the manager, we'll continue to dive into that. We have a dedicated research team that sits in Orlando, and so they're constantly meeting with investment managers. So in any event where we start to see, we typically will say 5 quarters of underperformance against the investment policy statement. That typically gets you through that full calendar year, allows you to see any trends. Once it gets to that phase, we'll have deeper discussions. We have the managers come to our office. But every quarter we're reporting all of this information to the committees. And so if at some point we feel like, our research feels like, the committee feels like what is being explained in their numbers of underperformance isn't explained by the overall market environment, then perhaps it'd be necessary to make a change. We'll provide a search book of investment options. We'll go through those, kind of talk about the pros and cons, make a recommendation to the committee, and have them select that. So it's a regular, from this point forward, every quarter we're out here meeting with the committee.
Okay, good, thank you. No more questions?
Commissioner Adams? Commissioner Zoll?
Nope. Peter's done some great due diligence and learned some new items from the discussion. And I think my main concern when we postponed this a couple of times was to make sure that some of the staff that had contacted us had additional opportunities to meet, to discuss. you can tell an issue is getting addressed when the number of incoming emails on an issue is declining or has gone away. So I'm feeling that the employees' concerns have been addressed. They may or may not prefer one option or the other, or have a preference, but that they have been able to express their concerns. And I think going back to the people that were shortlisted has now given us even a better product than what we had, probably 45 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Does the county administrator have any concerns?
No, county staff follows along with the recommendation as recommended by the clerk. I'd like to thank the clerk for his leadership on this.
Yes.
I think this is something important that we are doing to fulfill our fiduciary responsibility and to make sure that our employees have the best options available. I think this is an improvement from what we had, and so would recommend going forward with the recommendation.
Yeah, I do want to thank Jeff Smith and his staff for working through this and bringing this information forward. And the fact that we had to delay the decision and look for an additional amount of resource in no way, shape, or form is a reflection of the magnitude of the information, nor the importance and the fact of the presentation itself. It's most certainly the most important thing is that the employees fully understand their options and what they're about to engage in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I'd also like to, I just brought the issue up and instigated it, but some of the heavy lifting was done by other people. Suzanne Boyle was an integral part of this.
Yes,
I'd like to thank her for her continued input and good suggestions along the way. The firefighters union was actively participating in this, and they provided good comments along the way. John O'Connor was very active and very astute about some things during the committee meetings. I'd also like to thank the HR representatives from the property appraiser, the tax collector, and supervisor of elections, as they were all part of this process as well. So it wasn't just me, but it was a cooperative effort with the consultant to do what's best for the employees. And I just thought that we should go in this direction. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
As I said earlier, where I'm struggling is the balance of where the loss is going to be attributed to, because anytime you change something, there's always a loss, and how you distribute that loss is what makes the difference. But as Jeff said, whether we go with the option at 12 basis points or 25, all the plan participants will still have a significant savings because of the reduced record-keeping fees.
Fee reduction. Yeah.
I think there'll be, when the committee comes out with their final funds, I think they'll also be selecting funds that have the lower internal fees, so there'll be additional savings there in the actively managed accounts. And so for that, balancing that with the employees, the older ones that are in the fixed account and their needs, I'm going to go ahead and move that we do approve staff recommendation, which is the revised nationwide option 1, which is a 5-year contract with 2 optional 2-year extensions, and the fixed account guaranteed at 3.5% for 60 months, and a record-keeping fee of 25 basis points.
Second.
Is that including
Doing
Commissioner, does that include also the recommendation of changing the ordinance code?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Change section 104.5.
That would have been presumed, yes.
And just the caveat that we, and it includes the 8 educational things, but also just make sure that we tell these employees that are in the fixed account that, hey, you need to really be thinking a little bit beyond that, because in 5 years from now, that may be going away. And so I think we just need to start laying the groundwork and educate them up and get them prepared for that day. But but that would be the motion, and including the deferred comp section.
And furthermore, I really want you to wow them with information. Again, as Commissioner Zorc pointed out, the The calls, the emails have subsided substantially, and thank you for all of the outreach from all parties, but I think continual education is critical. So,
And
thank you, yes. Yes.
Just to follow up on that, so there is the 8 meeting days per year, but there is will be a coordinated effort of education prior to the consolidation as well. So within the next few months, Nationwide will be on site multiple times to hold, a vast amount of those meetings in addition to kind of the 8 for the ongoing regular education. So,
And that will be here on property, well advertised through Human Resources and all concerned, and perhaps we can have a unified meeting. This way we can extend it to all of the constitutionals who are engaged, and this way we can have a nice crowd.
absolutely.
Thank you. Well, we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0 unanimously, with Commissioner Solari absent. Thank you.
Excuse.
Yes, it is an excused absence, as he is fervently working on our constitutional assignment, and we hope he's doing great work with our state constitution. Thank you all. Anybody need a, not yet? Okay, very good. Okay, now that most of the crowd has left, we now have a request to speak, and that's, I see that Audrey Rigby is here, and Bill Rigby, so please come forward. I know that you wanted to speak regarding the sewer services and the Wabasso community. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning,
Good morning,
Rigby.
Commissioners. Good morning. My name is Audrey Rigby. I'm the president of the West Wabasso Progressive Civic Club, and here's a board member, my brother.
And my name is Bill Rigby, also a member of the Wabasso Progressive Civic League. This morning, we're here to speak on the sewer project. And Mr. Chairman, before I speak, I would like to first congratulate the staff on the first phase of the water and the sewage. I think that was a tremendous job that they all put together, and I think it worked out tremendously. However, we're now in the second stage, and then also possibly a third stage. But I'm here today because I don't know, Mr. Chairman, but I'm here to ask some questions to get some clear understanding of where we're at with the sewer project in the Wabasso community. And the first question that I'd like to ask Mr. Chairman is that, is the letter of intent for the sewage project for the Wabasso community, has it been rescinded, or where are we with that project?
Well, I'd like to bring up Vinnie, who we did have a discussion on this, and it reflects back to one of the previous commission meetings where a decision was made to halt the progress of that portion, and basically it was overwhelming financial. But if with your indulgence, Vinnie Burke will give a brief synopsis.
Okay.
Just as a refresher.
Yep, for the record, Vincent Burke, Director, Utility Services. Thank you, Chairman. On January 17th of this year, staff brought to the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners the second revised bid. We went out for bid in September. If you recall, those bids were high. We tried to do some value engineering in the design documents. You recall there was a septic to sewer project for the West Wabasso area that also included some drainage work as Plan B. So you had a Schedule A and Schedule B that were submitted. Interestingly enough, The low bidder at the time actually came in higher the second time around by about $2,900 or so, and that was Blue Goose Construction. At the time, board directed staff to not terminate the project, but to put the project on hold due to the deficiency and lack of funds for the $1 million delta between what was initially estimated to cost the project versus what the competitive bids came in at. So at that time, staff then wrote to St. John's, for which we had a cost share grant agreement in effect, and also to the Florida Department of Environmental Opportunity to notify those agencies that we would no longer be progressing with the particular projects due to the lack of funding. So that's where we stand at the current moment.
Again, so the project came in well over the allotted amount. And again, we earmarked granting process specifically because this type of project would probably earmark about $8,000 to $10,000 per household. Is that correct, Vinny? And
without any subsidies, it would be about
what was the
$20,000 per
projected
household.
earmark, the dollar amount for a per household contribution?
Well, there's two parts to that answer. One is without any subsidies, you'd be close to $20,000 per household, and that's assuming that you'd have all the connections. What we had in phase one were folks that said they would connect, but when the stick of pipe was actually put in the ground, if you recall that we had less than ideal numbers, and we had to go back to the CATF and amend the FDEO grant because we were below the actual amount when we actually connected. So again, depending on the number of folks that would connect, but closer to $20,000 per household number.
And that would be
subsidy.
without any assistance or subsidy. So.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I thank Mr. Burks for the information that he has just supplied. However, no one came to Wabassa Progressive Civic League or a phone call to the citizens of Wabassa to inform any of us of the criteria of what was going in this project. I think that the citizen of the community, when the first two projects came along, I think that it was said that we would be very transparent in whatever we do, transparency. However, in this particular situation, there's no transparency. We didn't know that. Well, that's not we. The citizen of the community did not know that the intent of the funds was sent back, or however it may be. We did not know. We're still in limbo as to where are those funds or where we at with the sewer project in the Wabassa community, because we don't know anything. We're just finding this out. However, I did have a meeting with Mr. Burks, and he did at that time told me that they were thinking about sending it back or doing whatever they're going to do at that time. I think that was in about a month, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. He did inform me that. But I wasn't going to tell the citizens because we have a meeting and meetings and meetings and meetings, and those meetings was to inform us every step of the way of what was going to transpire in the Wabassa community concerning the sewer project. However, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, I would like to say something, and then Mr. Burke just mentioned the bid tabulations. Let me say this. I've been doing bid tabulations. I've been doing also what we call cost analysis. And in your cost analysis, and I heard the word price gouging, I've heard the word for as that the price was high, however it may be. But in the process of a bid tabulation, when you put out something on the street for bidding, you gotta have what we call a cost analysis. And in that cost analysis, you're gonna have medium, low, and high. I don't care if a pipe costs $100 or $200 or $1,000. When you do that cost analysis, it's gonna tell you exactly what your range is, or when you put it out on bid. Because when you put it out on bid, you gotta have a low, a medium, and a high. When I hear the word and say, well, it's too high, price gouging, that bothers me a little bit, because if I did my cost analysis, when I put that bid out on the street, I know exactly what price range I'm going to come in. If you put out on the second time, you again know exactly what that price range is going to be, because your cost analysis is going to give you down to the T Because of course we did cost analysis, and sometimes we're wrong. That's why we have to go back to the drawing board and say, well, hey, wait a minute, what did we do wrong here? But when we put it out on the street, we're in the ballpark because our cost analysis is going to tell us exactly what that price is going to be. Bar none, it's going to tell you that. I don't care if a pipe costs $2 million. It's going to give you that range of where you can go with when you put out on the street. Mr. Chairman, we're in need of sewage. We really are. That community has been suffering a long time without sewage. We need sewage. To me, it shouldn't stop because of money from the state, federal government, or however it may be. We need sewage. We don't need it 5 years from now. We don't need it 10 years from now, Mr. Chairman. We need it now. Yeah. We're suffering. It's the most inhumane thing to do right now with that sewage. Some people still on well water. Some people have separate tanks with no bottom. Where's that sewage water going? Straight down to the table. Remember, Johns Island came in up on the hill where that spring is. Remember, they came and put 4 big, 20-inch pipes up there. And when they did that, it drained all our well water, because we're the closest one to the Johns Island. So it drained our wells first. So we was glad to have county water. We was ecstatic about having county water because of the water table, because we weren't pumping nothing but sand. Now we have the sewage. And it appears to me, Mr. Chairman, I could be wrong. I'm not always right. But it appears to me the most godly thing to do is to have the sewage. It cannot just stop there, Mr. Chairman. We got to move somewhere or somehow on this sewage problem. And this was appalling to me, Mr. Chairman. Coming up, I'm going back a little bit in history, just briefly. I picked fruit. Grapefruit, oranges, Valenciennes, whatever you want to call it, Mr. Chairman. And what happened is that you had the Rouse, you had the Greer brothers, you had the Knights, you had Perry Fulford, you had Deerfield Groves. All of these owners was in our community. Almost half of us made them rich. Pick a lot of the fruit for nothing, but we made them rich. We made them to where they are now, like Orchid Island, what you call Orchid Island. That was Deerfield Groves. All of that was Grove. The Carmichaels, all of that was Grove. Now you mean to tell me all that we have done for them, that our community is in dire need of help, and no one wants to come along and help? No one wants to come and say, well, listen, let's go see what we can do for that community. Well, listen, Mr. Commissioner, it's not a black issue. It's a white, black, pink, purple. It's all of our issues here today in this room. It's everyone that have any heart that we have this sewage water, sewage that no bottom to. It's all of our issue. We need to move on this. This is not something that you just take the side and say, well, I'm not going to get $750,000, so I'm going to take a back seat and let it go, Commissioner, Mr. Chairman. No, we need to move on this issue immediately. Now is the time. I'm not here to throw no one under the bus. I'm here asking for help in the sewage area in our community. And it should not be a phase 2. It should not be a phase 3. What it should be is that less than 800 homes, 800, Mr. Chairman, that you cannot suffice us. We're just asking for help. United Way, Red Cross, whatever it takes to get it done. Let's work together on this. Let's get together and to find a way to get this done. Where do we have to wait on the state, whomever we need to wait on? I'm sure the county has a budget. I know the first thing you're going to say, we don't have no money. That's what they're going to say. And I know that, you know. But there are other ways and means of communicating, doing things. You know, let's get together and get the ball rolling on this issue. Mr. Chairman, what bothers me most of all, in 1995, there was $88 million. Now, if I'm wrong, you have an attorney there. He can call and find out if I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'm glad to say that, hey, I apologize. But that was an $88 million grant that was given to Indian County in 1995. And under that, in 1995, under that $88 million, it had in there privatization, private or non-private, or infrastructure. It had all that in there. So I'm saying here is that it was there in 1995. Why are we still like we are? Why we don't have no sewage? It was there. And if you look at the breakdown of it, some of it, I seen that you distribute the money all over the banks, in which you have the right to do that. I understand that. Being in government for a long period of time, you can do that. But in 1995, you got that money. I don't know what happened to it. If I'm wrong, please, I'm willing to apologize. But I know you got it.
For the conservation land.
Because you spent $35 million of it. But it was for conservation land. But out of that conservation land, you spent quite a bit other places. What I'm saying is that we're in dire need. We're no worse than Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan had what, iron in their water?
Got sewage and iron.
We got sewage. So what we got, only thing we're asking for is help, Mr. Chairman. Just help. Let us all sit down to the table, come up with a logical solution and what we can do to move this project along. That's all we're asking for. We don't want this project to just die down 5 or 10 years and then you say, well, we're going to wait till we get no money. Okay, now the money's gone. Where do we go, Mr. Chairman?
Nobody's looking forward to 5 or 10 years. The project did fall short, and I think it would be great in position to rely upon the citizens to step up to the plate as well. Okay, that's coming from somebody who has. I've actually paid for the water line and everything else that I had. I am on septic, and I do drink well water. But I will say that there are different levels of availability, and staff wants to have go forward and have quality sewer service to the community. The proposal happened. It did not happen in a vacuum. It happened when things were a little tougher and tighter. And then as the economy grew, as you say, you can have 3 different levels and you can be prepared and they'll be dead on accuracy. No, they won't. In a vacuum, there will be. As we study hurricanes, in a model, we can tell where it might be, and you know where the actual force is going to fall. Well, the same holds true with this. The project was earmarked and proposed, and the grant was applied for just a while back, but the economy was a little different. And unfortunately, the estimates came in extremely high. Nobody said price gouging. I just want to say that we did say that the prices came in overwhelmingly high. Now, whether they want the work or whether there is too much work out there so they can afford to be cavalier on their bids, that's up to them. That's free enterprise. It's unfortunate that it did not match, because we wanted it to match. If you think that we did not want it to match and we didn't want this project to go, you're terribly off course. We want this to happen. Now, Vinny is working on a few other aspects, and we'll be looking at Vinny. We'll be looking at another grant.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to address a couple things. I'll say on the grants, we didn't get rid of this project. We
shelved it.
Tabled it. We can continue to look for additional grants. I will say that it would be contingent upon receiving a grant, like all of our septic to sewer projects will be. I think we had a setback with the state. We were looking at maybe getting $20 million a year allocated for septic to sewer projects in the lagoon area, and that did not get funded this year. Hopefully something like that will get funded in the future. But we've got over 30,000 septic tanks in this county. If you assume $15,000 cost for each of them. That's $450 million. This is not a problem that we can solve without some help from the state or federal government. We simply don't have $450 million. We will continue to pursue this. We're bringing back a ranking of the septic to sewer projects here shortly, and the West Walbasso community will be included as part of that. I do also want to address the $88 million grant in 1995. I came here in 97. I'm not aware of an $88 million grant. I heard an allusion to the conservation lands dollars. If that's it, it's the environmental land bond. I'll tell you, in 1992, the voters approved a $26 million conservation land bond. Those bonds were issued in 95, but that was for $26 million. So first of all, it's $26 million. We did get some matching grants for that, but those bond dollars were restricted to purchasing conservation lands. We could not use them for septic to sewer projects. In our world, in municipal finance, if you say you're going to do something and you issue bonds, you have to do that with those bonds. You can't do something else with them. So those dollars would not have been available for infrastructure of any type, whether it's a road or a sewer.
And again, that happened well before anybody who's serving on this board's time, but if there was a commitment and it had to be earmarked in a certain manner, I'll assure you that we will make your assurances that it was earmarked and utilized in the appropriate fashion. And if not, we would have been given a gentle reminder from the issuing agency and the citizens as well at the time. The same way as we couldn't just mash the numbers a little differently with the grant that was given. We have to work according to the grant obligation. And if there was a way to extend it, I don't know. Were the citizens prepared to pay the balance? I don't know where we're going to get that balance from, but it would be nice if we could build that bridge. And we're looking at other grants to see if we can match them and join them together. No one wants it to see 5 to 10 years. And I realize that you have some septic tanks that were identified as less than operable. Yes, I agree with you.
Mr. Chairman, Audra Rigby, President. I did let my brother talk, but I'm the president.
That was nice.
And I wasn't notified or written. And most of you, I think, save Mrs. Adam, have my name and number somewhere in an email or something from me, because I write you all the time about issues. And you said that you wish the citizens would step up. And I think the citizens have in that area. They pay taxes just like everybody else. And I'd like to know from this commission, is there a policy that says that you cannot go in the general fund when it comes to that area? Does that area has to be granted up all the time? I just like to know.
And yet, Vinny, we did talk about that, about the amount of projects that we have attained and engaged with septic to sewer, with dollars from the general fund. Can you just elaborate on that?
There's one instance that I remember for phase 1 where there was an inability for the utility department to charge low income or very low income folks connection costs as part of the grant process, and we did have to go to the general fund to, I think it was 10 homes at that time, where there was some general fund dollars used to offset the connection costs that should not have been charged to some of the residents. So that's just recent knowledge that I have, where there were some general fund dollars that were used to offset the cost that could not have been charged because of the FDEO grant requirements.
And the previous project, we also used ship loans.
Ship loans.
And we exhausted any and all options for not only the grant, but the ship loans and other contributions, but we did not go into the general fund on the other project.
That's correct.
Yes.
Just to kind of, well, Vinny, one other question for you. Thank you. You know, we talked that the project came in higher than expected, but I think we should, just so the public knows, it wasn't a little bit. It was, what was the actual
Yes.
because when we applied for the grants, we had our cost estimate, so we applied based on our cost. And then once the actual cost came in, we couldn't go back to St. John's or others and say, by the way, would you pay this percentage relative to what the project bids came in at? But what actually was the difference between our estimate and the actual bids that we did?
It was about $1 million, Commissioner, and you're absolutely correct. Is we put together our opinion of probable cost based on phase one, where we had, I think, 4 or 5 bidders, and looking at some of the unit cost pricing and looking at some escalating factors, we tried to make sure that we had some good numbers going forward, so that when we did apply to the St. John's River Water Management District for that cost share, they can cover up to 33% of the construction cost. Those were probably a year in advance of us being able to go out for bid and get those sealed bids. So construction changes quite rapidly, and as we know, not only in our projects, but Public Works and FDOT for some of their projects, we're seeing price escalation much, much higher than what was initially anticipated. So the second point is we actually did go back to the district and ask for more money, but unfortunately it was a signed agreement at that time, and I know that we had worked with Melissa DeLosa, who was great as a point of contact, not only because we missed some of the milestones with some of the target dates, but secondarily because there was a reversion clause. If you don't start the construction or expend dollars, they can pull it back.
Right.
But third, to see if they had any contacts with the state. And so they did reach out on our behalf to the FDEP to see if there were some additional dollars that we could actually go after. And that's where we tried to get some additional funding in order to offset some of those, the delta that was as part of that project. Yeah.
Right. So we did explore the other options also up until, I'd say, 45 days ago, maybe even a little more. The $20 million in the state budget that we would have been able to tap into was thought to be in the current budget that would have been into effect July 1st, that we could have tapped into and revisited. As it turned out, the speaker decided not to include that on the House side of the budget. So we're kind of taking a step back to regroup and look forward to bringing something back now that we actually have hard dollars. We can go back to St. John's and apply for their amount. And if we get down to it and we've got a small bridge amount that we can't overburden the residents and we can't make the math work between our other sources, you know, we can look at taking a small portion out of the general fund, but we've got to look at the bulk of the dollars. And Vinny, that project wouldn't have included the 800 total houses in Wabasso. What was so that $1 million additional was over how many were in phase two?
So phase two is about 99 parcels, but we don't know for sure if all those parcels would connect. Again, we had solicited folks. They verbally said they interested, but again, going back to what I talked about in phase one, there was a discrepancy between those folks that said they would connect versus those folks that actually did.
Right, because we have typically not made mandatory connection. It's been voluntary, and that's made some connections come in a little slower, so you may spend all the money and then somebody doesn't connect. Right. And we know there's good reasons why they don't, because the additional cost to connect. Now, we do have SHIP funds available that we do see a number of those come through the system from time to time.
And there's some vacant parcels in that area too, so we were planning to lay the infrastructure so that if and when somebody chose to build in that area, they'd be able to connect to the county water and gravity sewer there.
And I do want to say we had committed some sales tax dollars already to what we thought. We were looking at 350 or 400,000 of sales tax dollars at our estimate.
Right.
Originally, and it was $1 million over that. And not only do we do the engineer's cost estimate based on the phase one project with adjustments, but we also, as Vinny said, it was bid one way. We had it value engineered and rebid for some savings. The number was slightly smaller, but we think the savings from the value engineering was offset by the construction market getting hotter, and the cost of equipment and labor actually went up during that time fairly significantly. That worked against us.
And I think you even pointed out there was a large discrepancy between some of the bids when we provided the unit cost pricing and what they actually came back on the bids. So.
And as far as accurately, you know, sometimes we get bids where they're 50% apart. You know, we'll have one project where the low bid's $2 million and the high bid might be $3 million. So this thought that you can exactly know what you're going to get, I think is incorrect, because we have different bidders that are vastly that bid vastly different amounts, and then always the ones that are the higher bids complain that the lower bids, there's no way they can do it for that, is always what they say. And then guess what? They construct the projects. So as far as not knowing what you get when you put a bid out, I think that is the nature of the process, and we do our homework beforehand. We do provide engineers' cost estimates as our basis for what we think the project's going to cost.
Well, so one last thing, Mr. Chairman. So I can see going forward over the next, probably I'd say 4 months, between the timing between the current legislative session that just ended and the next one starting really starts in about September. It's an early year. So I envision it. So we're going to be going back in a very short order in the next few months, trying to see how we can repackage this. What partnership can we get? What's the missing amount? How can we close the gap and get this project back online? So it's just, I'd say it's more of a pause as we step back and revisit and go back to St. John's and our other partners and say, look, how can we make this happen? And I think all of us are in the same boat. We'd like to see that happen for Wabasso. And there's other areas that when we talk with them and gave them the numbers also on 510, when it goes into the ocean, that area at the end, they had a sewer project and that one got pulled too. I mean, that's vast ends of the spectrum in terms of the income side. But that one didn't work either. So we're not going back for a revisit on them, but I'd say the pause that we put in on West Wabasso, because it is a very acute need that I think we're all pretty aware of, and that we're looking forward to bringing back something within the next, I'd say 4 to 6 months at the most. I think we're before either the prices go up again and rebid, but the construction market activity, there's a handful of utility guys in the region, and some don't even to give you a bid at all. And I'm sure Mr. Paladin knows how tight the market's been, and it's, if they can do this job or this job, and there's another one, well, if I bid it at this and I get it, I'll figure out how to get it on my schedule. But it's a subcontractor's market at the moment.
Commissioner Zard, I appreciate all the words that you have said, but however, I'm going to say this again, Commissioner Zard, is that what I heard again today says that from phase 1, and I'm saying again, if you have done a cost analysis, bottom line now, you're going to get low, medium, and high. That means that if a bid come in $2.5 million, when I sat down to the table and did my cost analysis, I'm supposed to come up with the same thing, ballpark, that you have come up with. Before I send that bid out to the street, I already know my price range.
Well, we did that, but the reality is the people that submitted the prices, Free Market Enterprise, our estimates here, and they know what our target estimate is for the project. They send us the price of what they're willing to do it for. They know going in what our estimate is in advance, and they submit what their company will perform the work for, which I wish they'd do it for an estimate, because that'd make life a lot easier, because the Go Line hub was 6 figures over. You name it, there hasn't been a project in public works utilities that we've touched that has not come in, because the lag time between the estimate from the prior job to the bidding of the new job might be 2 years, and a lot happens in that window of time, especially when you have an economy that is finally now more on the upside of growing, and there's more work for the utility contractors. There's more work for the folks that did the Go Line facility. Turned out great, but it was, we had to figure out how to bridge that one-time shortage on that, which I think we went into sales tax or something under our capital side. But that's all for me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And had the legislation turned differently, and we had lagoon recovery intact, or we had septic to sewer intact, we wouldn't be here today.
Right.
We wanted that to happen. You wanted it to happen. Unfortunately, the state did not want the dollars to happen. But that doesn't mean this is dead and gone.
Right.
And I know that Vinny's looking at other options and to see if there's any other granting available. And I don't know if passing a hat into the other funds is the answer, but I do know that we will get there. I did have a question there. Vinny, is there any limitation on the grant usage as far as timing? How long do we have before we have to say nay?
We have done
The
that.
board gave direction in January to
Right.
notify the FDEO and the district. Yep. So
Right.
we have done that.
But before notifying them that we were going to give, that we were not going to be able to accept the grant, we did explore with DEO, St. John's, to see if we could get some
Right.
additional grant dollars. Unfortunately, as Vincent mentioned earlier, there's also a time constraint. If you don't put shovels in the dirt by, I think
It was July 1 of this year for
July
the district
1,
grant, yeah.
we'd have, the grant would expire anyway. So
So
we-
Staff
we
actually,
were
for
out of-
3.5 months, tried to solicit additional sources after board direction before the letter was sent to the FDEO in May, to try to find a way to make this happen. And I can tell you, there's nobody more upset about this process than me, having invested a lot of time, effort, and equity into the project that actually began in 2012 when I got here. I made a commitment to try to do as much as I could for Phase 2. We carried it out. We completed Phase 1, which took until the better part of 2013, and then we immediately began on Phase 2. And so we actually did get the DEO in 2015. We didn't get the bids until 18 months after that. So you're correct on when we actually go get the estimate, when we solicit the grant, and when we actually get the competitively negotiated bids, there's a large time swath in between. So it's unfortunate if the bids had come in at about $1 million less, we wouldn't be here right now talking about this. We'd be out in the field putting pipe in the ground.
So we have to initiate a funding process once again now.
We would have to go through, especially if there's DEO dollars, another CATF. We'd have to get approval from that. We'd have to have 2 public hearings to the board. We'd have to apply for that. In the response we got from FDEO, they noticed that we did not receive any funding. Therefore, there's no penalty associated with the termination that was put forth. But yes, we would have to go through that process again, which is not a simple process, but certainly doable. It's just going to take some time to go through the CATF, the 2 board hearings, and then apply for limited dollars from the state. We can also then try to apply for the district, but that's also going to take putting together a grant application and submitting for those funds as well. Yeah.
Mr. Burks, what is the time frame for all of that? I mean, you
For all that, at least 12 months.
12 months.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot shorter than that 5 to 10 years that we intimated, and we're not supporting that either. We're supporting now.
Commissioner, Chairman Fletcher. In the past, Wabasa has shared some grants with Rock Ridge and Gifford. From this time forward, we'd like to have all grants that come to Wabasa just to come to Wabasa and not to share them with Rock Ridge or Gifford. We gave $800,000 to Rock Ridge because they had some draining issues. I mean, somebody can verify that, but I was in the room when that happened.
I think what Mr. Rigby's referring to is after Hurricanes
The FEMA grant.
Francis and Jean, we got $7.5 million to use for countywide purposes.
Yes.
We did the water improvements in West Wabasa with those dollars. We did Rock Ridge drainage improvements. We also built a fire station with those dollars. There were some changes in the plans as we went along. We had some initial plans. We ended up allocating some more dollars to Rock Ridge, and I think we allocated additional dollars to the West Wabasso water project actually during the process. But that was a $7.5 million one-time grant after Hurricanes Francis and Jean for total countywide disaster recovery.
And there was another one with Gifford too that had nothing to do with the hurricane.
This project, let me explain that. I think you're probably referring to this project, Phase 2. This CDBG grant had the septic to sewer for West Wabasso. It also had a small portion for East Gifford stormwater improvement for about $250,000. That was a very small portion of the CDBG grant. We We applied a lot of sales tax dollars and the MSBU, the East Gifford Stormwater MSBU dollars to that project. It actually helped gain points so that we could get the CDBG grant, because all of those are awarded on a competitive basis. So we didn't think if we did this standalone as a West Wabasso septic to sewer project, we would have been in the money. We actually included both of those projects in there to maximize our points to ensure that we did get the grant. So, and I do want to say that we funded a very small portion of that, or we were planning to fund a very small portion of that stormwater project in Gifford with the CDBG dollars. Most of that was going to be from sales tax and a contribution from the East Gifford MSBU.
And that wasn't an add-on or a tag-along project. That was earmarked from the very beginning, intended, and part of the initial proposal, correct?
Right, and designed
But
to
small
maximize
portion.
our
Small
points.
portion.
Right, to get the grant.
So, but if we apply for a grant for septic to sewer that is for the Wabasso community, you have our word, it'll be for the Wabasso community. The FEMA money is entirely different process, and that's for it's countywide. Okay?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. Really and truly, I do. And
Thank you.
but the problem that I'm having is that, Mr. Chairman, is that I look at 510 right now. I'm looking at money-wise now. I'm not looking at project-wise. I'm looking at money-wise.
100 million.
I'm looking at 510 road. That's going to be about, what, 90 million, maybe $100 million?
It's big,
Okay, now.
and we well talked about it.
But the issue here is that sewage seeping into the ground. To me, that's more important than 510 road right now.
Well, the 510 project we've been discussing will probably not become reality for 8 to 9 years, as we discussed as well, and we all know that. And you suggested that, you know, we need the septic to sewer now.
That's correct, Commissioner.
And I agree with you, sooner than better, that's for sure. However, when you're looking at 8 to 9 years for the roadway that's estimated, then we're looking at, we want this sooner, and you commented that we don't need it 5 to 10 years from now. We're gonna do our hardest to get it as soon as possible. Available granting, again, 4 months from now, legislation will be back in order, and perhaps maybe the speaker will be knocked off kilter as far as to what we can have here earmarked for Indian River County. I didn't say Wabasso, but we will apply any and all dollar that we can to make up the difference. Again, that's a board decision, okay? But me speaking with you now, publicly, if we get dollars, I'll do everything I can to ensure that we get the most attention towards getting this project completed.
Okay, let me ask, this is hypothetical, Mr. Chairman. Can't we get, since it's so vital to the community, can't we get other organizations in to, that we can go to, the civic lead or whomever, to expedite this project? I mean, to me, just to wait on the state or whatever, to me, it's so minute, you know? We need to move further than that.
I'm willing to explore other options, but again, there's not a whole lot of people out there with some extra money to say, hey, you know, we want to move it in this direction. There could be, and we will explore.
Can I ask one
I'm
more
open
question?
for that.
I don't know who can answer this
We
question.
can bring it
I
back
don't
to
know
the
who can answer
board.
this question for me. Okay, the state dollars that grant comes from, doesn't it come from the federal government? It's $750,000. It's federal money, then it's handed down to the state. Am I right or wrong?
That's,
The CDBG grants do
Yes.
come.
It does come from the federal government,
yes,
right?
it
So-
filters down
okay.
through the state, then to us, yes.
So if to me, I'm asking a hypothetical question. I don't know if I'm correct or wrong. Since that money is coming from the federal government, and it is like, it's federal, handed down to the state, then the state in return, I think everybody's bidding upon that money or applying for that money. Am I right or wrong? So so why can't we just go to the federal? If we need help, I mean, if it's a dying need for something in the community, and the state is saying, well, hey, listen, I'm only going to give you this amount of money. Aren't there boundaries that we can move further, or expedite, or go to see what we can do? Then if we cannot do it, we can say, well, hey, we tried our best. This is the best that we can do. Is it or is it not?
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Burke answered that question. He said staff spent 3.5 months looking for alternative funding sources, exactly what you're asking them to do. They did that for 3.5 months and could not find any additional funding.
We will continue to work in a direction to complete this project, to get this project activated.
Before I take my seat, I'm going to say this.
Yes, sir.
To me, and I could be wrong, what I'm about to say, but I look at it like this. God made us all. He gave us a heart that we all can work together as one to improve a situation, to make it better. And I look at it sometimes and I ask God not to show me to be like it is a color thing, because that whole community is black, surrounded. The West Fork Baptist community is all black. And I ask God not to have me, to give me a vision that is all black thing. I like to have the idea that it was a white neighborhood, it was a black neighborhood, Hispanic, whatever neighborhood that it was. I look at it that, hey, we're gonna do our best to get it done, whatever it takes to get it done. I just pray that every single day and every night that, hey, I don't know if my mom and dad died because of all that bad water. I don't know. I know that, hey, one of them died with kidney problems, But so I'm saying to myself, I don't want my grandchildren or anybody like to suffer through that again, that inhumane issue. That's why I'm so vocal about that sewage, that raw sewage going down into that water table, because I don't want nobody. And they say a lot of times, I listened to a thing last night, they were talking about children go to school because they don't have the proper water, and all that. I'm saying to myself, hey, that's an issue with children. All that bad water that they're from that sewage. A lot of them still have wells. But the last thing at least, I would like to find a way where we, all the people that in that, I'm working hard at it, that we can find a way to get them off all the areas in that neighborhood that have that county, I call it county water, that we can work in a way to ensure that they get that county water. Because sometimes I don't believe they understand the magnitude of the water that they're drinking. So my goal is to go in that neighborhood to ensure that everybody that has that line running to their house, get it connected to it. Because we need it. It's important. A lot of them in that neighborhood don't understand. A lot of them can't read and write. And you know what the first thing they say? White folks do what they want to do. But I tell them, no, that's not the way. Don't say that. Let's pray that we all can work in the same environment. We all can work together and get things done for the betterment of the community. It's not a black issue to me. It's not a white issue to me. We're all in this together. And we work collectively together. Listen, we can move mountains. I don't want to be on that side of the fence. And Mr. Chairman, you're on that side of the fence. I want to be on that same side of the fence you're on. So we can work together as one. And when we work together as one, I won't be up here.
We have more in common than you speak.
I won't be up here. I won't. Trust
Thank
me.
you.
Because know why, Commissioner, Mr. Chairman? We're all working together for one accord.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as president, I'd like to be notified when decisions like that are made. As a matter of fact, I came before this commission, I think it was last year when Joe Baird was here, and I asked very kindly, I think I even wrote a letter before he became commissioner, that anything that happens in that community, please tell us.
Administrator.
And I think I really asked that right here at this podium. And I didn't get that. You know, I had to hear this third party through the grapevine.
No, I don't believe that's the case. I believe that we did have a conversation, and I believe that...
When you say you had a conversation, you called the community and said to the community that you sent this letter back or that you refused it?
Well,
That wasn't done.
right now. Vinny, was communication made through any emails?
I'd have to go back to my records to see if there was communication.
Okay.
He could call me. Vinny has that relationship
Yeah,
with
but
me.
you and I have talked. You call me at home, you call me here. We speak, I call you.
But you didn't tell me that either.
Let's not intimate that you did not have the information, because you did have it. And as it progressed, you were informed. It's unfortunate that the outcome is not favorable. The outcome is not what you anticipated or what we would like either, or what the citizens would like. But I believe there was enough conversation regarding this as well. And you're no stranger to the building. You're here many days. So I just don't want the impression that you did not get that information, because you did. Thank you.
I did not.
Thank
But
you.
that's neither here nor there. And Mr. O'Brien, the chairman said that he was going to wait for the state. And my brother said that he wanted to go beyond that. You said that Mr. Burke went beyond, but we don't know what that beyond is. That's still a very generic answer. That's all we're saying, just give us information. So we're not sure that he went towards the federal side. You just said he went beyond. We don't know what that is. It's a very generic answer. And this is a widget. This is a worksheet from phase 1. The inflation from phase 1 to phase 2 may go up. We also do bids. We've been doing it for quite a long time. That worksheet from phase 1 is going to look quite different from phase 2. And that's when you come up with different tabulations. And that's what we're saying. It cannot be that far off. And we can work together. I don't mind. I'm not here to throw stones, but we understand those things too. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll take a brief recess. Call back to order, and we'll move on to public notice items. Counselor, will you do the honors?
Thank you very much. We have a notice of a scheduled public hearing, which will be for June 13th, 2017. This will be to consider Collier Creek Estate Subdivision, Utility Phase 2, and Harbor Point Subdivision, Utility Phase 3, Water Assessment Project in Indian River County. Again, this will be a public hearing scheduled for June 13th. Additionally, we have a public notice of public hearing scheduled also for June 13th, 2017, and this will be to consider amending Chapter 315 of the Accountants Code of Indian River County. Both of these, this will be legislative in nature, and again, that will be a public hearing scheduled for June 13th. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Next item on the agenda is the Office of Management and Budget, the Tourist Development Council 2017-2018 budget. And these are recommendations.
Yes, sir. For the record, Michael Smykowski, Indian River County Budget Director. I'm here to present the TDC or Tourist Development Council 2018 budget recommendations. Initially, at the TDC meeting, there were requests of the TDC totaling $857,043. Plus, we have a contractual agreement with Historic Dodgertown for tourist promotion that provides $75,000 annually. So the total requested funding was $932,043. At this point, the estimate of available funds was $902,669, leaving a funding shortfall of $29,374 as we headed into the Tourist Development Council meeting that would need to be addressed. At the meeting, the applicants during a recess met amongst themselves to identify options to address the funding shortfall. Many of the applicants, the Treasure Coast Sports Commission, the Cultural Council, and Vero Heritage, agreed to reduce their request to their FY17 funding level with the Treasure Coast Sports Commission at $188,000, the Cultural Council at $60,000, Vero Heritage was at $13,000, and Indian River County Historical Society went $5,000 below their FY17 funding level at $15,000. The focus at the meeting, though, was funding the chambers, given all of the concerns about decreased funding for Visit Florida in the upcoming year. Obviously, the tourism promotion and marketing for tourist destinations is a very competitive thing. The goal here amongst the applicants was to ensure to the extent possible, to fund the chamber to protect Indian River County's market share for tourism amidst a large funding drop potentially, depending ultimately where the whole Visit Florida issue ends up. But at this point, they are significantly reduced from funding from a year ago. I think there was a good synergy amongst the applicants and cooperation toward recognizing that the chamber and protecting Indian River County's market share was important, and I think that was the overriding concern that was expressed at the meeting. I do need to correct one thing too. There's a Scrivener's error in the in Table 2. The chamber funding is 551,669, not 699. So, but basically, with those changes, the chamber's joint application would be at 551,669. The Cultural Council at 60,000. The Historical Society at 15,000, and it was noted that the Historical Society would work cooperatively with the chamber on some promotions that would help probably offset some of that funding reduction. The Treasure Coast Sports Commission at 188,000, and Vero Heritage at 13,000. The Florida Archery Foundation did not request any FY18 funding, so that subtotals 827,669. With the $75,000 contractual arrangement with Historic Dodgertown, we reached the equilibrium point of 902,669. And at the Tourist Development Council meeting, there was a unanimous vote, 9-0, to fund, or to make the recommendation to the board to fund the agencies as outlined in the slide that's before you as we speak. So the staff recommendation at this point is that the board approve those funding amounts, obviously correcting that Scrivener's error for the chambers. Again, they're at 551,669, and authorize the county attorney to prepare standard grant agreements for all funding recipients. That's a change from the past and is an offshoot of our recent discussion and board adoption of the amended outside agency funding policy that was approved. With that, I'll take any questions.
Yes.
Thank you, Michael. Yes.
And watching the, I wasn't at the recent TDC meeting where these took place, but watching the video, there was, nobody. This was the plan forward on the chamber side for Visit Florida being essentially eliminated in terms of funding side. Over the next 2 days, that may paint a different picture. Was there any thought of, if that happens, do we change anything?
I don't think it was thought at the time. I think it was thought to be a dead issue.
Right.
We were surprised by the special session
Just recently.
announced, and I've talked to our representatives. They were surprised. So
I was
think
always
everyone was
optimistic,
a
but
bit
I didn't know
surprised.
how it was going to turn out.
One of the things that we are hearing is, looks like that is set up to probably provide some additional dollars to Visit Florida and Enterprise Florida. One of the things that I have heard is that there are going to be some changes to the funding that would require some matching partners that may not benefit some smaller areas like ours. That's the concern that I'm hearing, that maybe Visit Florida is going to get some more money, but it might be helpful in some larger places where there are more availability of, like theme parks to help match the funding. So we're a little wary that help will, that increase in the Visit Florida funding, if it does happen, may benefit some of the larger tourist attractions rather than some of the smaller communities like ours.
Okay. All right.
In addition, sir, historically too, the chambers had always stepped up when there was a potential funding shortfall issue, and they have taken less on an annual basis than they could potentially have asked for. So I think there was recognition amongst the other applicants that, the chambers stood by them for many years, and in a time where marketing and promotion may be particularly important, that it was time to stand by the chamber and offer that reciprocal arrangement that is typical.
As Mike points out, again, I did have the opportunity to be in the room, being the chairman. However, over the past few years, both chambers of commerce have always traditionally stepped up to the plate and reduced their budget and operated accordingly, knowing that we have Visit Florida funding, but without that and absent of that availability, we did think that this was a dead issue, that it was just going away. With that, the synergy in the room with all of the applicants and those on the dais, the board, all felt the same way, and the energy went towards the ensuring that we do have a strong Chamber of Commerce effort in both Sebastian and Indian River County. And again, I want to compliment and thank all of the applicants for that recess discussion that they all had, and embracing our chambers, actually returning the favor for over the past 4 years, where the chambers did reduce theirs to ensure that even those who applied for a minimal amount of funding were able to fit within the budget and not be eliminated from any consideration. So once again, we look forward to an update on the legislative action, that perhaps maybe there'll be the 11th hour information we need to hear regarding Visit Florida, but that will all be addition and bonus, and we did not make any contingency plan to revisit this to say, all right, can you ask for more, and we can give a little bit here and take a little bit there. We present the council's findings and recommendations, and I stand by the recommendations of the TDC.
And two other questions, if I might, and they may be more appropriate for you to answer versus Michael's side, so you can...
We can work as a team.
There you go. I think currently the Treasure Coast Sports Commission is the only one that has a measurement means for heads on beds through tournament booking, through hotel contracts and those things. Is there ever been any additional discussion for others to measure? And I know it's a hard thing to measure. You do a lot of outreach efforts and marketing, and you know people come to here, and you can't always point to where as easily as the sports commission because it's a tournament. You know, there's 30 teams and there's 20 players on a team, and you can measure that easier. But it is they're the what I call the measured participant, that we know shortly after the year's over pretty much exactly how many room nights that entity participated in generating. But I think it's always good to be able to measure, like we did with Children's Services under Hope Woodhouse. You got to be able to measure where your money's going, and that's just a personal goal of mine. I don't think, at least listening to a couple of the meetings, watching the replays, the measurement element is not.
If I could address that.
Yes, sure. As you served on the board as well.
I did. You know, I think when we are talking about tourism and we're talking about tourism funding and our tourism economy, we need to look at it from the aspect of what are we doing to create a better experience for the visitor and the tourist that's coming to our area. A lot of the groups that we do fund through TDC, they bring added value to those visitors' experience once they are in our community, and they make that experience more enriched.
Okay.
I think the Sports Commission, yes, they do use an economic indicator factor to kind of bring this number to TDC that indicates what they have brought to the economy. That economic factor is not necessarily, it's just one that they use particularly to their industry. It's not a standard necessarily. So that's something to consider as well, because just because they have specific numbers doesn't necessarily mean that those numbers are representative of the actual what is happening. I'm not saying that their numbers are wrong. I'm just saying that they've chosen their standard.
Right.
The other issue that's always difficult with TDC is the hoteliers, while they've gotten much more able to give those bed numbers, that's a little bit, to them, that's kind of their trade secret. Yeah. So sometimes it is very hard to get those numbers. And the last thing I would say about the Sports Commission is they are a 3-county entity. So a lot of the numbers that they do give us are over a 3-county area versus an Indian River County specific numbers.
Right. Okay.
So you have to keep that in mind too.
Great. Terry.
2 points. The Treasure Coast Sports Commission in 2006 actually engineered the program in which they use. They do a great job, the yeoman's job, in tracking. But again, they have a captive audience. They know how many team members are going to be there. They estimate the families. They know about how much. It's not just about a call around. It's all calculated. I think that, and not taking away from what they do, but it's a little easier to do the head count.
Right, it is.
Okay, you have players and family and attendees, and they're looking for a special rate. I will want to say that our hoteliers are a little bit more forthcoming than what I've experienced in other arenas. I was in that industry. You know, sometimes it's like liar's poker.
Right.
You know, yeah, we got a few.
We're full, but we only charge them $10 a night.
We're holding a few on the side. Our hoteliers in this community have been very, very forthcoming from what I've seen, and a few of them serve on the board as well, and they are free to exchange numbers. I will say that the Treasure Coast Sports Commission, by and large, assists in that community value that we have with all of the hoteliers in exchanging. I think because it happens with a lot of the sporting events, that it has now bled into other activities and festivals. But again, as Commissioner Adams pointed out, it's very difficult to identify each and every heads to beds when you're talking about a casual festival, a 3-day, it's got to be a 3-day event in order to qualify. Some of it has to do with the likelihood of people returning too, although we have to earmark primarily on heads to beds in allocation of funding.
Right.
Thank you.
Good.
I wish it was industry-wide, but it's a very difficult concept to utilize the same equation factors or the
And the other item, which is
data
just
that they use.
one thing that a couple of years ago you heard me come to the Sports Commission meeting, and you were great. You gave me about an hour to stand up there. But at some point, as we go forward and our tourist base grows and the dollars overall grows, it seems like it would be, and you touched on it very well, is the overall experience. If Vero needs to be and the county needs to be adding things you can experience, and the only way you get to do that is it's a new venue type or a new experience needs to be added, is at some point in the future we look at a revenue model that maybe we distribute to partners 80% of the money, and then 20% of the money is parked to accumulate to add a new blank, a new experience, a new something, so we can continue to grow the experience. So if somebody comes here for vacation for 3 years in a row and they go, well, gee, we've done it all, or something, you got to kind of keep reinventing yourself and adding something new to the menu that people can experience in the community. And sometimes it might just be highlighting something that, you know, I'm born and raised here, and I still learn of things that are going on, like the new guy that does the tours on the lake with an airplane. You know, he takes off, lands you on a lake, but people need to, that's an experience that you will never forget. I haven't done it yet, but it seems pretty incredible. Not that we want to get into that business, but I think when we look at things to experience, we have to look at how do we create a fund of sorts to, if the newest thing on the horizon for people to do, whether it's sports or some other activity, how do we could say, hey, we've set aside some money to help foster something that creates an additional experience for the community. And that's a dramatic shift from expensing 100% of the dollar, so it would be something in the future you'd have to look at phasing in. But I think creating a set of resources and money that we can put into something that would add to repetitive visitors' experience. I know when I like a place, I like to go back where it's easy. I know it, I like it, there's something else to do, there's something new. Maybe I'm odd when it comes to that, but people like friendly places to go to and things that they like to do and learn something new when they come, or do something different when they come. But that's something that we'll save for another day, but I think we just kind of have to look at the big picture on that. How do we can't stay stagnant. We have to look at how do we add great things to do in the community or enhance them.
Everybody likes to feel at home, and I like to say that people like their vacation where we find home.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we just have to tighten up a little bit, and we'll have that base that we're talking about.
Right.
Commissioner Zork, to your earlier question, there is an index that's very easy to track to see how the tourism is going, and it's the parking complaint index.
You've been getting some calls?
You mean on Ocean? You mean like the city Ocean Drive parking complaint index?
Yeah. And then the other index is the 2-hour wait for a restaurant index.
Right.
Yeah, that's been going up every year. So.
Yes, it has been, and
that conflicts with snowbird season as well.
to me that means a robust economy. When you have to wait more than an hour at a local restaurant place, that means that's good. I mean, you're happy to wait because you know the ramifications of the wait means there's more people ahead of you that are here visiting and consuming.
Mr. Chairman, let's go ahead and move the TDC recommendation of, and Mike, it's $827,669 for 2017-18.
Yes, second.
I just have a quick question before we vote.
Yes.
The $75,000 for Dodgertown promotion, isn't that just for a couple more years? How much longer, or is that forever?
4 years.
That's for each year in
Debt
the
reduction?
lease. The current lease that we have provides $75,000.
We have
I think we got
$75,000 for 4
more
years,
yeah.
and so we're looking at $300,000, and that'll be an additional funding area for future TDC.
Well, or we have an extended lease with them and some provisions for.
I was just curious. I knew
Right.
that there was a finite time. I
Yes,
wasn't sure how many.
it is
months.
4 years,
Thanks.
$75,000.
Yep.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor to
Second.
fully accept, and I did that, but
you
you know
already
what?
did that? Okay.
I'll yield that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Zorc. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Solari absent. And it did have a spreadsheet, so I'm sure he would have been pleased. Thank you. With that, now we're looking forward to the next item on the agenda, which is our legislative update. And Kate Cotner will be providing that. And I guess you do have a bit of a presentation.
Just a little one, I promise.
The ever-changing world of the state.
Yes, the legislative process. So as you all know, beginning of May, the 2017 state legislative session concluded with a finale. There was a budget, and we were very excited about it, but I just wanted to walk you through our priorities, the things that we supported, and the measures that we opposed, and where it all kind of ended. So our legislative priorities, ooh, it was fancier than I thought. One was to promote and monitor the health of the Indian River Lagoon. 2 was to support transparency, accountability, and oversight of the Florida Municipal Power Agency. 3 was to promote legislation to increase safety and prohibit unconsented cost shifts associated with high-speed passenger rail. 4 was to support the expansion of Foreign Trade Zone 136, and 5 was to support a dedicated and reoccurring funding source for beach restoration projects. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that, everyone. I just want to walk us through the appropriations requests that we put in for. So the first was Hurricane Matthew funding. As you know, we had about $10 million, I think, for our beach restoration that we needed for the damage that was caused by the hurricane. So we requested $5 million, and that was with a 50-50 cost share. We've also put in a request with FEMA. So with the FEMA funds, I believe that there, and Jason can correct me, there's a 25% between, and that would be split between the state and the local governments. So the final appropriation by the state of Florida was $13.1 million, and what that really accounts for is their portion of the 25%, the 12.5% for along the entire East Coast. So the second one was Osprey Acres. This was a priority for the board, and I'm happy to say that we survived the governor's veto pen, and we will be receiving a little over $1.2 million for that project. The third was the Sebastian Septic to Sewer project. We put in a funding request for this, and we thought that there was going to be an appropriation of anywhere between $20 to $25 million for septic to sewer conversions along the Indian River Lagoon, and we were included in that. Unfortunately, at the last minute, that was taken out of the budget for this year, so we can pursue that again next year. So legislation supported by the county that passed. There was legislation to assist the county in achieving its recycling goals, which was exciting. There was also legislation to assist the state of Florida in the opioid crisis. This is something that, if you recall, the board, we were seeing it here maybe a little bit, but it's certainly an epidemic that's it's around the state of Florida, and so we were supporting our sister communities in their efforts. There was also an appropriation, a one-time appropriation of $50 million for the state of Florida beach renourishment and restoration projects. Our funding for, I believe it was Sector 5, was included in this, so we will be receiving some funds for that. Legislation supported by the county that failed. So legislation promoting the High-Speed Passenger Safety Act. I have on here, obviously, that it failed because it didn't pass, but we were very successful in laying a foundation for this particular piece of legislation. There's kind of this saying that bad legislation goes through the first year, good legislation takes 2 or 3, and great legislation takes 4. So I think we shouldn't be discouraged by this. We did get a lot of positive feedback, and hopefully the board will continue with that effort this coming up legislative session. As I discussed earlier, an appropriation for septic to sewer projects for areas along the Indian River Lagoon, the Caloosahatchee, and the St. Lucie estuaries. I'm not sure why it was pulled at the last minute, but I know this is a priority of the Department of Environmental Protection, so it will be back. Legislation to improve the state of Florida's local rating under the National Flood Insurance Program community rating system. This really didn't get a lot of traction, but again, I think that they were focused on some really big ticket items this year, or this particular session, and so the foundation has been laid and it will come back again. Let's see, legislation requiring hospitals to develop best management practices to assist the state of Florida's opioid crisis. This was part of a package. There were, I would say, 4 or 5 bills, legislative bills, that were put forth for the opioid crisis, and this is just one that they couldn't get through, couldn't agree on. There was another one also that they couldn't agree on, and I expect that it will be back because that is not going away. The governor has declared it to be a health crisis in the state at this point. And finally, legislation creating a dedicated and reoccurring funding source for beach restoration. I have been told that this is coming back next year. This is a priority of Senator Latvala, and hopefully we will continue to be supportive of that. So legislation opposed by the county that failed. Legislation to preempt local government's ability to regulate short-term rentals. As you recall, we really did work hard to neutralize this bill, and it wasn't going to impact us. We do expect this will be back next year, and I'm not sure if it will have that neutral language, so we just kind of need to be prepared for that. Legislation to preempt local government's ability to regulate businesses, professions, and occupations. I don't think I need to remind you guys that there's a movement, I guess, with being led by the speaker, that he would like to rein in local governments. He thinks that we are over-regulating, and so he's putting forward a number of these bills using different House members, and this was one of them. But we were successful in just shutting it down. This next one, legislation to entitle a first responder to workers' compensation if they suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome. It's under the opposed category. I want to make sure that the viewers at home understand this is something that is very important to our community. It's just the way that this legislation was written, that we took an opposed position. However, I would encourage the board to work with a sponsor to put in some better language, and I think there's an opportunity to do that. And finally, legislation to prohibit local governments from enacting, extending, or increasing taxes without otherwise authorized unless there's specific conditions. And this is something that we know is going to come back next year, especially concerning our millage rate, and everyone is aware of that. And we are going to, tomorrow, just a good opportunity, so tomorrow, the Treasure Coast Council of Local Governments is meeting, and I will be presenting kind of a strategy on that home rule collaboration. So hopefully these bills, as they come back next year, we will have a unified voice in opposing them. So legislation opposed by the county that passed, legislation that allows small wireless facilities to be placed within our public right-of-way. This legislation, we did a lot of hard work, and I will actually give it to the Florida Association of Counties and the League of Cities. There was extensive negotiation. So the final bill was far more palatable than the original bill. But now we have to implement it. So this is the 5G network that everyone, I'm sure, will use one day and love, but there's just going to be some growing pains as it gets put into place. And the constitutional amendment to increase the homestead exemption by an additional $25,000. This was originally going to be placed on any property that was $125,000 or over. A last-minute amendment was added, so this $25,000 exemption is if your home is between $100,000 and $125,000. So it was amended to be more palatable. It's still going to be a significant hit to local governments across the state of Florida.
Kate, can you back up one?
I can try.
Just in case you make this presentation to other folks, which you may throughout the year, under legislation allowing small wireless facilities to be placed within a right-of-way, you might want to look at adding, allowing Fortune 500 companies making billions of dollars want to allow small wireless facilities for free in our right-of-way and process permits for free ahead of everybody else that's in our community today, adding to our community. That's just my little vent on that one.
And I'm assuming that those 5G services are going to cost less than the 4G does today.
I'm sure there'll be a reduction. Yeah, everybody
I,
hold your
I
breath.
will. I will add that. I will add that in for future. Yeah.
Their argument was they didn't want to pass any costs on to the consumer, so I'm sure those are going to be a cost decrease for the 5G service.
And Kate, while we're on that one, just one thing. Sitting in the committees where this was discussed, a lot of the representatives kept asking for a number. And I think FAC, we might have made a mistake by not giving a number. So I think the members would have been willing to go with the number we gave them. But going forward now, we know that the DOT can negotiate a market rate for their infrastructure. So hopefully by next year, we'll have a number that DOT has negotiated that we might go back to the legislation and say, okay, here's what DOT is getting. Can you amend it so we get the same thing DOT is?
That is certainly an option. I think this is a topic for years to come. I mean, it's a nationwide problem. They're doing it across the nation.
But it just seemed a lot of them were asking, well, give me a number, and we weren't doing that. So then the fallback was 150, and so I just think we need to go in next time and be prepared to give them a number, because that's what they were, to me, that's what they were looking for, so.
Okay. Nope. Well point.
Oh, and also on that,
Yes.
that same one, if Commissioner O'Brien's finished, is there a revisit period on the rate that was done? Like, is this the rate for 5 years, or is it forever? Does it have an inflation escalator? Do we know anything about how that number will carry forward to the future?
Commissioner, right now, what we essentially have, the only number we have in there is for co-locations, it's $150 annually. That's all they've told us in the bill.
Right, okay.
And to Commissioner O'Brien's point, it's certainly something we're going to watch and play a part of as that legislation gets amended, and hopefully amended and changed through time.
And I think the simplest for us would be is you're using our right-of-way, you pay the same franchise fee everybody else that uses the right-of-way pays, but I know that wasn't something that seemed to get a lot of enthusiasm, but that's just making everybody equal. In this case, now we've given somebody a sweetheart deal that will have to, well, we didn't, the state did.
And you'll hear a little bit more about this as I get to my item in a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm done.
And I just would like to add, they said this was contemplated in our communication services tax. Well, we collect communication services tax, which I will note is down about 7 or 8% again this year, after being down a similar percent last year, because the state keeps passing additional exemptions. And when this Communication Simplification Act was passed that generated the communication services tax, which took away the ability to franchise cable companies from counties, for the telephone tax from the municipalities, it was supposed to be revenue neutral. Long story short, that was 2006. The iPhone came out in 2007. So to think that this revenue that was created in 2006 even contemplated 5G, nobody even contemplated a smartphone when that was being done. So I don't think they're because I think a franchise would be an appropriate thing. They say back, oh, we have the communication services tax. When that whole thing was created, there was no such thing as an iPhone or a smartphone. Right. So it's that revenue stream is not that.
And that's an excellent point, Jason. And I think that the legislature is going to have to look at the communication service tax in general, because it's not accounting for the current technology, but we'll see. Okay. Legislation opposed by the county that was successfully neutralized. So there was a piece of legislation that would limit local government's ability to levy a local business tax in excess of $25. And this would have been a pretty good hit to the public coffers, so we were able to get that out of legislation. There was also an amendment that was circulated, which would have circumvented a local government's ordinance relating to the certificates of public convenience and necessity. If you recall, we've seen this for several years. It was put in at the last minute. It was offered, but it was quickly shut down. So, and I can say that Florida Association of Counties did an excellent job on that. So other legislation that was out there was legislation about firefighters and the cancer presumption. This piece of legislation popped up, I would say, in 3 different bills. There was also many discussions about medical marijuana. There's rumors that there will be a special session B to discuss this, to implement the constitutional amendment. Lake Okeechobee, obviously, that was Senate Bill 10 was a priority of the Speaker, of the Senate President, and that has been signed by the governor. And now, let's see, notice of pollution. If you recall, there was a pollution event where there was a sinkhole, and DEP and the public was not notified for an extended time period. So now there is something, and actually they did rulemaking. DEP did rulemaking that was shut down by an administrative law judge. So the legislature has stepped in and they've put forth something in statute. There was also a lot of legislation on construction, which will impact our signage and the building officials. So, and finally on vessels, just as far as registering boat vessels and how the process is to categorize something as a derelict vessel so that we can step in and remove it. So what to expect in 2018? Obviously, the Florida Municipal Power Agency, we are working with our legislative members and watching how this whole sale unfolds. There is also High-Speed Passenger Safety Act, vacation rentals, opioid crisis, coastal management. We've actually talked about all of these. Fracking, it will probably be back again. And really be on the lookout for fiscal responsibility and transparency onto local governments, having to do with our millage rates. One thing that's not on here that was brought to my attention yesterday, and it goes back to the communication service tax, is there was a piece of legislation, it didn't get very far, but it would have redefined internet video service to be excluded from communication services. And an example of that is like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime. If it's excluded, why it's important is because, as Jason just pointed out, we're down, the communication service tax is down again. And so other communities like the city of Chicago, I think even the entire state of Pennsylvania, have stepped up and they started putting that tax onto these internet services. And so they're trying, if this were to go through, it would limit our ability to once again just be able to collect more with that tax. So it's something that I will add to our list and be mindful for next year. So now we're on to special session. The special session starts tomorrow. I just want to give a brief update. What's at play with the special session is there's $215 million that's being proposed for K through 12 funding, $75 million for Visit Florida, and $85 million for a grant program within the Department of Economic Opportunity. And this grant program is called the Florida Job Growth Grant Fund. And my understanding from just reading different articles is that the discussion is focused around the grant being for rural infrastructure transportation projects for local governments and individual training programs for state colleges and technical schools. Currently, there's language in there that's with a proposal that would say you could not use this exclusively for the benefit of any single company, any single corporation, which is great. And if passed, many expect that the governor will sign the education bill. That's a priority for the speaker. So it's a little bit of a trading going on. There is talk that the Senate, there's certain senators that are not 100% on board because they want to have some sort of say in that grant program. It gives a lot of actually gives the governor exclusive right, or the executive branch, the exclusive right to say who gets that grant fund. So I think the Senate, there's certain senators that are being vocal saying that they have a problem with that. But that is what, over the next 3 days, is going to be talked about, and I will give you all updates as it unfolds. Any questions for me?
I do, Kate, in our backup under construction, there's Senate Bill 1312 by Perry and House Bill 1021 by Oliva that relate to, we cannot have an ordinance that contains any building, construction, or aesthetic requirement or condition that conflicts with or impairs corporate trademarks, trade, dress logos, et cetera, et cetera. So does that basically throw out like our State Road 60 corridor plan where we say, okay, No neon flashing signs, and the monument sign has to be, whatever it is, 4x4. And somebody can come in and says, well, you know, our corporate signs are normally 8x8, so we can now therefore put an 8x8 sign up.
Actually, Commissioner O'Brien, it's interesting you ask about that specific issue. One of the discussion points last week we had the Florida Association of County Attorneys discussion or meeting was the fact that this bill probably directly conflicts with Gilbert versus Reed, which is what this board adopted an ordinance to try to correct and get around. So I don't really, Stan and I have been in email communication already, but we're kind of baffled as to how we deal with the United States Supreme Court telling us something and then the Florida legislature telling us something else. And so it's something we're just going to have to work through and kind of figure out how our sister counties are also addressing the issue. But it does put us at a really bizarre bind in terms of what we can do or what shouldn't do.
Right, and to me, this sounds like it preempts us totally from anything like that.
Right, except unfortunately then it tells us that we have to look at the sign, read the sign, figure out what the sign is, and then figure out how to either allow it as an exemption or not and how to allow it, as opposed to what exactly the United States Supreme Court said is the second you start reading the sign to try to figure out what it is, even if it's an exemption or a non-exemption, then you're in violation of the United States Constitution. Yeah. It just puts us in a really strange place. I'm sure the Florida legislature thought about that though when they adopted this.
Oh, sure they did.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Could we expound upon the drones?
If you would like to.
Yes, it does come up in community discussions, and
okay, not a problem.
There has been some concern in the municipalities as opposed to what we're doing in the unincorporated area.
Okay.
And where do we lie with Yarborough?
Okay, so there is a piece of legislation that, if signed, will go into effect July 1st, 2017. And the reason behind this, let's just go over a background, is that the federal government is, and Dylan, I'm sure can come in here, because I think we also both did research on this, but the federal government is looking into regulating this and having it sounds like they're going to preempt the field, but in anticipation of that, or in the meantime, I guess it's a better way of putting it, the state of Florida passed some legislation that would cover unmanned aircraft systems. So basically vesting the authority in the state to regulate the ownership and the operation of these systems. They're commonly known as drones. And the legislation also authorizes, subject to local government regulation, the operation of these drones on sidewalks, but prohibits them on certain state-owned trails. So, but for our purposes, political subdivisions, which are counties, local governments, are prohibited from enacting or enforcing any ordinance on it. They preempted our ability. So if there are complaints, it should really be now directed towards the state of Florida. So until the federal government says something.
We're not looking at the larger type drones. We're talking about even the recreational, what's perceived as recreational drones that people like to film manatees or something of that nature.
Sure, personal drones. Yep.
We would not be able to regulate.
That is my understanding from this. Yes. Yes, they took over a state preemption because I think that when they do this, it's usually because local governments have varying laws, and so it's hard for whatever, a person or an entity they don't know which laws apply in which jurisdiction, so the state stepped in and they preempted it. That is what they did, yes.
No,
if it's signed. It hasn't been signed yet.
I could understand somebody with a joystick going a little too far past and crossing a jurisdictional boundary and suddenly be in non-compliance.
There you go.
So, great news. Anything else, Commissioners?
Any other questions? Okay. All right, wonderful. Thank you.
James Gray did get some help with the vessels as well.
Yes, it wasn't a significant piece of legislation on derelict vessels. So it was just more classifying certain vessels, like what state they're in, what shape, to be helpful to categorize it as a derelict vessel. But as far as streamlining the process of removal, that's something that hopefully will be worked on in the future.
Currently, it takes anywhere between 30 and 90 days to make a vessel move.
Right.
It's a long time.
Tell them that when it's submerged, that's a pretty good clue. It's
That it's
derelict.
inoperable.
Right.
Right. You have to always remind them of that.
We do get a few of those each year.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Jason, did you have
Comment, I decided not to.
comment withdrawn? Thank you. Well, thank you. We appreciate that. The next item will be in the county attorney's matters, is designating receiving system for transportation plan.
Thank you very much. Per Senate Bill 12, passed by the Florida legislature last year, each county, in collaboration with their managing entity, is to develop a transportation plan by July 1st, 2017. This plan must describe the methods of transportation to facilities of individuals who are subject to involuntary examinations or involuntary admissions per Florida statutes. On April 19th, this plan was presented to the Public Safety Coordinating Council for Criminal Justice, Mental Health, and Substance Abuse. The committee included many different stakeholders, including representatives from the Sheriff's Office, the Vero Beach Police Department, the Chief Judge of the 19th Circuit was there, Public Defender's Office, and the State Attorney's Office, just to name several of the few representatives who were in attendance. Comments from that committee have been incorporated into the final draft that's presented before you today. Under the plan, the Sheriff's Office will be the law enforcement agency who will be responsible for taking someone into custody and deliver the person to the appropriate facility. Depending on the circumstances, the individuals will either be brought to the Indian River Medical Center's Behavioral Health Center or to New Horizons of the Treasure Coast in Okeechobee, which is located in Fort Pierce. County Attorney's Office recommends that you take any public comments and then vote to approve the transportation plan. And I want to thank Commissioner Fletcher, who also served on that committee, and it was helpful for his insight, both as a sitting member of the County Commission and also a former law enforcement officer.
Well, thank you for that, Counselor. And I think that there was a lot of great input in the room, and there was some greater understanding because of who was in the room. We appreciated all the input from the service providers and from the local entities and law enforcement entities as well. But thank you.
Move staff recommendation.
Second. I'll second that. And with that, I know we're limited in attendance now, but is there anybody in the room that would like to provide additional input in this matter? Thanks. We have one person nodding. Thank you. With that, we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. Any further discussion here? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Solari absent on assignment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item is the right-of-way ordinance from the County Attorney Matters. Counselor.
Thank you very much. We've discussed a little bit of the issue already. Under the Advanced Wireless Infrastructure Deployment Act, local governments are limited on their ability to prohibit, regulate, and charge fees for placement of small wireless facilities in the right-of-way. The Act does allow for local governments to adopt ordinance provisions that address several issues such as insurance, indemnification, performance bonds, security, liability, and abandonment. Because the Act comes into effect on July 1st, 2017, County Attorney's Office has worked with the Public Works Department. We've drafted some language, which is in your backup materials, which addresses some of these issues with respect to co-locates on county equipment or county poles in the rights-of-way. County Attorney's Office requests that the board authorize County Attorney's Office to advertise this ordinance for a public hearing on June 20th, such that we can have this heard and hopefully ordinance passed before the July 1st deadline. I will note there may be some changes to this bill between now and June 20th. We've been looking very hard at reading House Bill 687 over and over again, and also reaching out to fellow counties who are working on the same issue. So we may get additional ideas as we move through the process. Also, we expect to bring back a rate resolution along with the ordinance at the June 20th meeting, if so authorized, which will address any fees that need to be addressed as part of this process in shifting to dealing with this issue. I'll be available for any questions, and I see Rich Spirica is also here as well. Thank you. Just recommend that the board authorize County Attorney's Office to to advertise for the June 20th meeting. Thank you very much.
So move.
Second. And that's a motion by Commissioner Bryant, seconded by myself. Rich, you have anything to
I have a couple for Rich as he's coming up.
this as well, but yeah, and then we'll,
Okay.
most certainly.
Rich Berger, Public Works Director. I don't have anything to add at this time. Dylan's got it covered pretty well.
Thank you, and I appreciate the great cooperation between the departments as well.
Yeah, it's been great because
Yes.
Rich and I keep coming up with different ideas and then bouncing it off each other, which has been really helpful to deal with this issue.
And your input, and you have been far more outspoken than you appear to be today, but your input in this matter is greatly appreciated. Thank you. Just want to give you the opportunity.
Couple questions, and I know we'll be talking about this at another meeting, but as the July 1st potential first applicant date is on the horizon, just a few things to think about as we're going forward. One, as with any code change or a change in a permitting policy or procedure, on July 1st, you'll either have, shopping cart loads full in the lobby waiting to go towards your office, but hopefully not. But if so, I think we have to come up with who was here first, time stamping, those types of things, because if somebody comes in and they say, we're going to use pole X, and he's the first guy that attaches, well, his hole through the pole to attach his equipment may be fine, but if 2, 3, and 4 come along and they all want to start drilling holes into the pole, and does that mean applicant 2 needs to reflect applicant 1's proposed installation procedure? And this is stuff you're going to have to think through, but I think you have to really look at how do we keep track of who came in and when and what time. I think just to kind of clear the deck so that somebody comes in and, well, you were second, he was first, and this is what they're doing, and you have to now work around them because they came in the door first. Secondly, a big concern is staff right now is really stretched before this issue, and for two purposes. One, identifying the cost to process these applications, because they have a time sensitive that if you don't process them by a certain amount of time, they're deemed complete. That's a great, I'm sure a lot of the builders in the community would like to know that if you submit in 14 days and there's no comments, that it's just considered good to go. But many of the folks that work in your department are salaried engineering type positions. Just to throw this on the table that we can revisit at the next meeting is if we take these and we come up with who's going to process them, I don't want to ask them to spend more time and more extra time, more after hours or overtime on their nickel as coming up with a way of, hey, we do those on after hours or on Saturdays, these particular ones. One, we can identify the cost that the state spent for us for free to quantify an unfunded mandate. And then secondly, it doesn't disrupt the daily flow of the workload your department already has, which is already, kind of bursting at the seams as where we're at today. So you can bring back suggestions or ideas, but I know when guys are salaried, it's not a problem to say, hey, we've got to knock these couple things out, but when we're facing a potential deluge of applicants, I can't ask that staff person in good conscience to chip in another 10 hours a month or some quantity of time when they're salaried and they're taking time away from their families and their other part. That we have to come up with a fairness model to address this type of potential significant demand without disrupting the current flow of the department. That's kind of my observation from it, but maybe when we come back at the other one, at the next meeting, you can bring forward suggestions of how you think would be a fair way to treat your staff, a fair way to treat the applicants. And I know those folks are working hard every day for the folks that are living here, expanding their businesses, building homes, those types of things, and the other public works projects you've got countywide. I don't want our residents in that process to suffer because the state decided to give a freebie away and put them basically at the head of the line in front of everybody.
We agree with you, Commissioner. One of the things we're looking at is basically, we're going to have a timestamp. We don't know what's coming in on July 1st or actually be July 3rd. We don't know what's going to hit the desk. So we're concerned, just like you are, okay, if they're going on traffic pole A, everybody's going to want to probably be on that same pole. So we've got that under control. The second problem, the second issue with staffing, again, we don't know what's coming in. We're limited to the number of permits we can process in a day. However, we don't know what the extent of the applications will be. Will there be 30 per application? How many we're going to get? We're already talking internally how we're going to hit the first flush when they do come in and see what we get. We've been contemplating going outside and maybe bringing a consultant on board to help out with development review, not with this right-of-way co-location. Most of the issues that we're going to have to address with the first permits that come in are going to be internal staff, traffic poles, is it our light pole, things like that, that if we brought a consultant on board to help with that, they'd just be turning it back over to staff because they don't have the internal access to that information. So we're working out logistically what we want to do and how we're going to approach this in a systematic manner so that we do meet the legislature's guidelines for 14-day review of complete applications and then 60-day review to make sure that the applicant is either denied or we give them a permit. So we're working on it, and we appreciate you letting us know or giving us your information, but we're working on it. Good. It's going to be interesting.
See, Rich, I knew you had a lot of input because you've been working closely with the attorney's office. You just had to get time to get it out there. But we appreciate everything you're doing. Again, I don't think the sky is falling, but the clouds are moving. Mm-hmm. And we can't really predict as to how intense this is going to be, but I appreciate your proactive approach. So thank you.
If you don't mind, when you actually do get the first applicant in, if you can, when the time comes, let us know, and if it's a PDF type document, here's what it looked like. I just have a lot of curiosity side. I get the part of the G5 part, but they're gonna have to bring power from somebody to where it's at that may not be available on our pole. I hope it doesn't look like the old cartoons where they show the street and there's, all these wires from pole to pole to pole. That would just look.
No.
Well, I don't think it's going to get to that level, but by the same token, looking at some of the inner cities, there are buildings that have so many antennas on top of them because they can't put them in the immediate right-of-way. It's highly populated, that there's nowhere for pigeons to land. I mean, these things are out like concertina wire pointing upward at great spikes. I think that there's going to be a happy medium found, and I don't think it's going to be low to the ground, and all poles have power. So I don't think we're going to see the draping of the wires that we would see in third world nations and people attaching extension cords to buildings.
You never know some of these guys, they're creative. They got the bill passed.
Yeah, that's true. That's
with
true.
no permit fee, which
that's true.
Again is whoever. If you'd asked me a year ago, would that ever pass? I'd go, heck no. But then the birth of, well, not the birth, but the leadership that some of the folks had this year that didn't see it the way the counties see it.
Anything else?
Nope. Good.
Well, that's on motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. And any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Solari absent.
Thank you for your support on this item.
On assignment. With that, that concludes the agenda. But I'd just like to say a special thanks to our county attorney, deputy county attorney, and staff. This board made a decision to go forward and send Kate up to Tallahassee, and it was in an effort to reduce some travel expenses that some of us may have been incurring. It also reduced the amount of lobbying efforts that had to take place, and I think the return of investment has been clearly displayed on the accountability, the amount of information we're getting, the interreaction as to what's happening in Tallahassee in real time, in a real-time basis, not, 2 weeks later when, well, we could have done something else had I notified you. And I want to say thank you. Kate Cotner has given us continual updates, actually updating us from Tallahassee and getting that information to us to see what we can do in dealing with our representatives and making this a better place for the citizens of Indian River County.
And to follow up on that, Chair, there's one thing you hire lobbyists for, and they help you try to move legislation and set up certain meetings. But what Kate is, through the board's direction, what Kate's really brought is exactly what you talked about, which is, I'm getting updates all the time. We're getting I can sense our inputs getting provided into certain bills and into the FAC folks, and we're not just hearing after the fact what happened in Tallahassee. And I think that's really instrumental, and also just really helps us, our knowledge base, as we leave session. What do we need to accomplish? What do we need to work on as we look at next session, or something as simple as this wireless bill? Kate's been on top of this since it's been talked about. We've provided our comments to FAC and other folks, and we've seen oftentimes a lot of the comments that we've included have been addressed or included in. So I think that middle ground between having a full lobbyist and just passively watching, Kate's done just a really amazing job for us in that regards.
And just to add to that, while we have a great contact with our immediate representatives, Senator, as we can speak with them and basically not wait in the lobby too long. The added bonus has been when we did have the occasion to be there. I'm sure it's an experience of all of us that when Kate's about and discusses something, that we get near immediate access as well too. She's been quite the door opener, so we appreciate it. Thank you. Yes. And from the citizens. With that, this meeting is now adjourned.